You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 15th part of What If Deku Helps His Best Friend Peter Parker. Smash the like, share, and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. The last several days had been hell for Tenya. Ever since he got out of the hospital, it had all been a blur. All he could remember was that night, Native's body hitting the ground, Stain's knife coming towards him, the paramedics tending to him with Yaoyorozu at his side, her climbing out of the ambulance, Manuel's worry, the wailing of his overwrought and distressed mother. The next day was bad. It was only natural that he was getting kicked from Manuel's agency, a permanent stain on his record. What came next? A phone call from his brother. He could remember the disappointment, the anger, all because Tenya lost control of his own emotions. He had blood on his hands and brought shame and worry to his family when they were already wrought with it due to Tensei's condition. As Tenya felt the bus lurch, he slowly got up and departed from it, feeling the crisp early summer air. He walked, eyes glued to the ground. It was still dark out, but behind him the sun was beginning to rise. "Good morning, Ada-kun." The voice startled him, and the speedster turned, finding Principal Nezu watering the flowers that lined the walkway. Principal Nezu, sir. Ah, what are you? Gardening is quite relaxing to me, so every morning I water the flowers before it's time to open. The mouse creature kept his placid smile over his features, brushing a stray leaf off of a flower before turning to face Tenya. I imagine it's been several troubled days for a young man such as yourself. Tenya fidgeted where he stood, straightening from his bow, though his head still hung low. "Yes, sir. I'd rather not have you needlessly waste your time on me." "It is no waste," the principal calmly replied in assurance. "You are my student and it seems you wish to talk." Tenya looked at him, staring down at the much shorter mutant who still held the tiny watering can in hand, smiling up towards him. Then, reaching into his pocket, the scion of the Ida family pulled free a letter before he lost his nerve. He held it out to him. "Sir, I would like to formally submit my request to leave this school." The bear mouse's smile fell away. "Are you requesting a transfer to another hero school?" Tenya shook his head, eyes to the ground. "No, sir. I'm dropping out of the hero course completely." "Why?" Tenya sucked down a breath. "You know why." For a long interminable moment, Nezu stared at him as Tenya held out the letter towards him. The blue-haired man's shoulders slumped again, arms still stretched. Then, abruptly, the mouse turned his back on him. Tenya started, surprised, only to see the mouse hop onto a nearby bench, little legs dangling off the side. He patted the seat beside him. "Won't you join me? If this is to be our last discussion, I feel we should both be seated." "No." Tenya closed his eyes, features scrunching up before he relaxed minutely, and allowed himself to walk towards the bench and sit. He didn't speak, still clutching the letter in his hand. "Finally, can you tell me what happened that night, Ada-kun?" "I made a mistake." The words made emotion well up again in his chest, an apple lodging in his throat. There were other descriptors to be had, ones more harsher like those his brother had used. But this was the best summation. Nezu shifted in his seat, little paws linking together over his legs. "How so?" "I went after Stain, and I got Native-san killed." "You are partially correct." Confused, the youth turned towards Nezu with a questioning gaze. "I read the reports in the news and from Manuel-san's agency. Native-san was already paralyzed by the time you intervened from what I have gathered. Your intervention did not cause his death. But I didn't even try, Principal Nezu." The youth hissed, sucking down the tears. "It didn't even cross my mind to try." "Saving him, you mean?" "Yes." Tenya looked down, staring at a spot on the floor. "All I could do was look at Stain. All I could see was Stain. It never even crossed my mind to try and get Native-san, to get him out. The only thing I could think about was revenge. I didn't act like a hero. I acted like a fool." His shoulders slumped. Nezu nodded. "I see. And you believe this is your only recourse, your only path of atonement." There was a pause, a lengthy, pregnant one. "A man is dead, because I didn't try." He turned to Nezu. "What other recourse is there?" The mouse creature sighed. "I will not lie. What happened was a tragedy, and yours isn't the only voice that claims you to be at fault, Ada-kun. There, that should do it. Then you will accept my no. What? There was a finality in his voice, almost like a thunderclap, so at odds and different to the morning songbirds and crisp air that it almost felt like a slap in the face. Tenya's eyes were wide behind his glasses. Nezu shook his head. Not yet. You rushed headfirst into a mistake that night, and I believe you're rushing headfirst into another mistake in your grief. Ida-kun, I can't in good conscience accept your request. Not yet. I'm not worthy of being called a hero, Tenya retorted. Nezu hopped off the bench, patting himself down before turning his hand towards the letter. It slipped free of Tenya's numb fingers and into the mouse man's paws. Give yourself some time, Ida-kun. Give yourself some time to grieve, and to think. If by next Monday you can think of no reason to remain a hero, no hope for yourself, then I will reluctantly accept. But only until then. The tears made his eyes glimmer, but he swallowed them down. I understand, sir. He stood, bowing low one more time before turning and leaving the school grounds before the other students arrived. He couldn't bear to face them. Izuku was caught off guard, seeing a familiar sight before him as she had a big tan. Her skin a light bronze. Her arm muscles toned and refined, and, wait, that hairstyle. Uraraka-san. Izuku gawked, seeing his friend. Gone was the fair skin, but she was bronze instead. How much time in the sun did she have? Hey Midoriya-chan, she's been like this all morning. Asui spoke up, sitting at her desk. Yeah, she's had the eye of the tiger, Ashido added. Guess training under the wild pussycats can do that. She's looking more like you, Ashido. The brunette mused, to which the pinkette grinned widely. Oh, hey Midoriya, how was your internship under Ed's shot? It must have been très magnifique, Aoyama added with his hands cupping his chin. Especially since you took part in taking down Stain with Parker-san. Yeah, what was it like? Ashido chirped, beaming as she approached. Izuku blanched. Oh man, getting too close. He noticed Shiro, Ajiro, and Hagakure approaching too. We've been trying to ask Parker-kun about it all morning, but he's been quiet about it. Tell us. Oh man, now she was really close with that beaming grin. Those gold-black eyes of hers. Too close. Then, learning from a top 10. You had it made, Ajiro wistfully commented. Did you learn any secret ninjutsu? Hagakure waved her arms. I doubt a guy as secretive as Ed Shot would teach an intern some secret technique. The black-haired teen with tape dispenser elbows shrugged at the invisible girl's query. Before he turned towards Izuku. Did he? Izuku gulped, eyes darting back and forth as his peers were mobbing him. I learned a lot under Ed Shot Sanbibi, but I didn't learn any super secret ninjutsu. He laughed, fiddling with his fingers. See company secret, he said. Move it, said a gruff voice as Izuku turned in. There was Kaken. He was frowning, hands in his pockets as he stared at the mob outside the door. Oh, good morning, Kaken. Izuku moved aside, as did the others as the blonde boy walked inside. Thank goodness for Kaken. He didn't know how long he could last with Ashido-san not knowing the definition of personal space. HNN. Kaken grunted in response, and Izuku caught his eyes. The green-haired teen wasn't sure, but he seemed more like himself. There was something there now. Izuku couldn't contain his grin as he saw his childhood friend walk across the room towards their row. He noticed Parker was there as well as Kaken got to his seat. Neither one said so much of a word, or even looked at each other. Parker was looking out the window, deep in thought, his reflection neutral on the window. That's right, Mirko-san that night wasn't happy. Izuku's eyes scanned the room, seeing Takoyami brooding to him, so yeah, he was under one of the top 10 too. Hey Takoyami, how was your time under Hawks? He asked, walking up as the raven-headed boy opened his eyes. I had a great deal of self-reflection and learned. I am grateful for the opportunity, even if learning under him was a challenge. Takoyami mused with crossed arms. I trust it was the same for you under Ed's shot. Izuku nodded. It was the truth as he looked down at his hands, his fingers scarred, but otherwise he felt as fine as ever. One step closer to becoming the hero he wanted to be, just like Ed Shot said. I guess my experience was the same as yours. That's good, Yaoyorozu said as she entered the room with a smile. Working for Yoroi Musha must have been something else. Izuku cupped his chin. The man has always been secretive, more so than Ed Shot-san. In terms of his quirk, you and him are a perfect match, so it only makes sense you were able to learn off of him and his experiences. He is also an incredible close-range fighter too, given his background in various weapon martial arts like Kendo and Kabuto. I heard he was also a master archer in his heyday as well, but did the limits of his quirk go beyond simple weaponry and into complex gadgets and tinkers and other sorts of items? There's rumors he used to be a handyman in a town up north in his youth too, which may also help in his background too. And Midori, a voice said, and Izuku looked up, and he saw the sitting form of Peter Parker looking up with a smile, as Yaoyorozu and Jiru were chuckling. Todoroki blinked. You're mumbling again, buddy. Ek. Izuku blushed and clammed up, placing his arms around his head. Sorry, it's alright. Yaoyorozu waved it off. We can talk more of our time under our mentors at lunch, if that helps. Not like I have much. Jiru mused as she twirled her earphone jacks. I helped in managing a hostage crisis, backup, escort and logistics, nothing fancy. Hostage situations. That sounds so exciting, Kirishima said, before he closed his eyes and gripped his fist. Fourth kind had me and Tetsu do community service. I had to do it. It was the manly thing to do, even if all of your internships sound incredible. Hey man, nothing wrong with doing that, Peter said, with him leaning back in his seat, now fully engaged in the conversation. I did some of that over the last couple of days. It's nice and refreshing. You did. I didn't consider Mirko as someone who does those kinds of things, Jiru asked, and Peter laughed awkwardly. After she and Ed shot captured Stain. As a reward I was let off early, so I killed time and did some work. Peter spoke, and Izuku bit the inside of his cheek, picking up on the subtext immediately. The anger she had that night, no way Peter leaving was a reward, and Izuku again felt the guilt swell inside his chest, remembering All Might's conversation in the park that day. I have to be better. So lucky, Kirishima uttered, shaking as he looked aside in self-reflection. You learned so much in so little time compared to us, as expected of ya, Ace. He flexed. I'm gonna have to train even harder now. Hey you guys, Shiro shouted, standing up and moving his arms as he stood by the door. Aizawa-sensei is coming. Get to your seats pronto. Several moments later, the door opened and Aizawa entered without his sleeping bag. Good morning. Everyone was in their seats as the shaggy-haired man walked in. He scratched his eyes a little. Saw some of you just entering their seats. You'll get there. He walked up to the front desk and placed his hands on it. Let me first congratulate you all on your first internship. We have received positive feedback from the heroes most of you worked with. All in all, well done. Now, I hope you all haven't forgotten that next week is your final exams, he said with narrowed eyes. A large groan came from Kaminari as his head met his desk, an audible gulp from Kirishima, and a surprised squawk from Ishido. So hopefully under your time at the internships, you brushed up on your classwork. But this week your classes will be undergoing study periods, completing any makeup homework or assignments and wrapping up any topics that we didn't get to cover. Business will go on as usual in your hero course period, in which case will be the normal lessons myself, All Might, and other teachers will direct. A hand rose up from the other side of the room, to which Aizawa nodded. Ajiro, sensei, if I may ask, what is our schedule? In our syllabus it only mentioned finals week and not much else. The tailed blonde asked. That is what this homeroom will be on, Aizawa said. As you finish up this quarter's curriculum and study up, next week's finals will go like this. He tapped his desk, and behind him the board displayed a holographic screen depicting the calendar. Monday through Wednesday will be your usual final exams, covering your general education in the form of written exams. Thursday, however, he tapped on Thursday, which said practical exam, is your hero course final, in which we will test on everything you have done ever since coming here to UA. What this involves will be revealed on that day. He saw another hand rise. Asui, just to clarify, but can we use any of the school's facilities so we can train and hone our quirks? And if so, when? She asked with a finger to her chin. Yeah, I need to strengthen my hardening bad, Kirishima called out. I need to catch up to everyone. Me too. I still need to get my acid spray under control, Ashido added. All I can do is swing it out, like a crazy hose. She had her hands entwined with her hair too. And my parents are gonna kill me if my grades remain the same. I'm doomed, Kaminari uttered with his face on his desk. Jiru snorted out a laugh at the sight. Quiet down, Aizawa uttered before anyone else could speak up. Now, to answer your question, Asui, yes, I will be enabling usage of all the battle centers for Class 1A's use. Just clear it with the school and you'll be allowed to any battle center or training facility to improve yourself before the practical. You will have this access until the day of the practical, so if you feel you need to catch up in your other classes, balance your time wisely in between using the school library or the training facilities. How you use that time is up to you. Izuku nodded, taking note of this in his head. Written exams, and then the practical. Simple enough. He needed to look over his grades and see where he could make improvements and last-minute catch up. Last time he checked, he needed to improve his math and science a little. Today we will be doing rescue training with All Might as well before lunch. You can use this period to start up on your studying or prepare for said training. The training grounds will be available for doing so. Another thing in that other hero courses above your grade and 2B will also have access to the facilities, so don't try to make a mess and share. As Aizawa walked to the door, the mood was clear. Their midterms were nondescript a while back, not counting for much given the sports festival and the situation regarding the USJ. But now was the big one, the final exams. Oh, and one more thing, Aizawa said as he stopped and looked back. Don't be making plans for summer vacation as well during late July and August, as we will be doing a summer camp of sorts. If anyone fails the practical, he glared, his eyes glowing red and hair waving. There will be hell, as a remedial course will be mandatory to those who fail. A summer camp, Izuku thought, a thought shared by everyone in the class that wanted to talk and blurt out their fantasies. Had it not been for Aizawa's withering stare, that'll be all. His hair settled down and he departed the room. Silence reigned on the room. And then, Summer Kalaimp, Ashido, Kaminari, Shiro and Hagakure cheered at the same time. Izuku chuckled, and he heard Peter behind him do the same as they began to dance around and clap their hands, spouting off what they might do there. For now, he had to focus on the present. To pass that final exam, walking through the hallowed halls of UA, Peter found himself enjoying yet another thing that he'd sorely missed these past few weeks, the UA cafeteria. There were more options here than seemingly any restaurant in all of Tokyo, and Peter was taking his time picking out the meals that had kept him going back in New York. When this place started serving cheeseburgers and hot dogs, he had no idea, but he wasn't going to complain. Lunch Rush knew how to make him good. Behind him, Izuku filled his own plate with a modest amount of rice and more raw protein than Peter thought the boy could metabolize. But hey, he wasn't one to judge what someone else ate. Even the bugs that Asui ate weirded him out from time to time. Have you ever been to a summer camp, Parker-san? Izuku asked, hefting his tray. Peter shook his head. Nope, couldn't afford them back home. Went to some class events, but not much else. Better not mention almost killing his classmates by mistake that time in DC. Izuku nodded. I've never been to one before either, but if it's a hero training camp, then it has to be intense. Really? Peter asked, taking a seat at an empty table and chowing down. You don't think it will be? No, it's not that. I just haven't been giving it much thought, Peter said with a shrug. Recently most of my time consisted of me thinking about the trip to I Island. My ticket for I Expo is in June, so after the final exam. Izuku's eyes light up. Oh, of course, you're hoping that a scientist there can fix your suit. He grinned. And glad. Peter chuckled as best he could, but the sound felt hollow. Unless there was a secret super genius on I Island whose quirk was letting them know everything, there wouldn't be anyone there that could fix the iron spider suit. If he and Karen couldn't get it done here in UA, with Mei and Power Loader Sensei's help, I Island was their last resort. That being said, with all the different toys and the machinery there, Karen might get a head start in something. Why yeah, here's hoping dude, Peter said. I can't say that I'm not super excited for it though. Knowing this school, it's probably going to be amazing. I think it's going to be manly. Peter turned around to mixed reactions. Hiroshima was grinning, eyes alight. Momo and Uraraka on the other hand had confused looks on their faces. You don't know much of I Island, do you? Momo asked. Yeah, it's not just amazing. Uraraka added. I heard it's incredible. Out of this world. Peter nodded, quickly swallowing his drink and moving to the side, giving up the full space in the booth for the three. That's so yeah, it's the tech mecca of the world. Makes everything in Akiba look like a third world country bazaar, Uraraka declared. Everything that's cutting edge in the world is always made at I Island. Indeed, Momo said as she split her chopsticks, ready to dig into her massive helping of rice, chicken and vegetables. From anti-gravity lifts to micro-machine technology and electro-enhanced projection, I Island has it all. Learn something new every day, Peter said, taking a bite. Micro-machines. Would love to learn more about those. He added, tapping his smartwatch and looking at it. Will compile what I can and review, Karen said in his ear, making him grin. Everyone piled in, and for a few moments, there was silence as they enjoyed their lunches. So you guys were talking about the summer camp? Hiroshima asked, the redhead practically vibrating on the spot just talking about it. We were talking about what it might be about, Izuku answered. Because looking into it, I haven't really heard of UA having a summer camp program. Having one now seems like overkill. But it could be that the school wants to continue our training regimen and make a habit of us training outside of school hours. After all, heroes work round the clock and we are expected to train in our downtime. They recommended training before the sports festival, so it might be. Dude, breathe, Peter said, his grin up at the young man's ramblings. Izuku looked down, flustered, an action that made Uraraka giggle, which only made the flustered boy flush as red as Kirishima's hair. Same old Deku, Uraraka chimed. While speculating about this development is admirable, Midoriya, Momo said. Cutting in, we should be focusing on our studies. As Aizawa-sensei said, finals will be the first obstacle before we can even begin to worry about the summer camp. I don't think we need to worry about that too much, Kirishima said, frowning. Gotta make sure I pass. Someone's confident, Peter commented, with a little grin of his own. Damn straight I am. I gotta make up for the sports festival, and where better to show my stuff than finals. Another sports festival, Momo offered with an amused look. Peter couldn't help but snort, and Kirishima rolled his eyes at the answer. I mean for the people here, Kirishima complained, cause there's nothing this school can throw at me that I can't bust through with all the training that I've gone through. Really? Peter asked. You're ready for the written test? He rested his head on his chin, smirking lightly. Kirishima didn't move for a few seconds, and Peter saw him bite his lower lip in anxiety. Do you need help studying? Momo asked. You sounded worried back in class when Aizawa made his announcement. Kirishima's head snapped to her. Are you offering to tutor me? I was going to make an announcement on the group chat later about it, Momo said. There's no rule against making a study group. And if we all work together, we can at least make sure that we pass the writing section of the final. Yeah, me and Momo were going to help, the brown-haired boy said with a smile. I'm pretty good when it comes to English, science and math, so Momo can handle others too. I handle my own in the field of arithmetic as well, Peter-san, Momo replied, sipping from her tea, but he could tell that she was amused. That's a great idea, Uraraka said, lighting up. That's our class reps, Kirishima said with a flex. Man, you two are so cool and on the ball. I need to get up to your level. Chill dude, you're fine. Peter laughed, eating up some fries. Thanks, and I was thinking about having it at my place. My parents have already given me permission, now we just need to set a time. I'll get the word out, Peter said, tapping his earpiece and his phone, pseudo-texting as he saw the words fly on his screen with barely a touch. I'm getting the word out, Karen said, and immediately there was a ping on everyone's phones. Peter then looked up and smirked. And Momo-san. He earned the black-haired girl's attention, and he racked his head for an equation. What's Poisson's equation? Poi what? Kirishima asked. I don't know French, but isn't that just fish equation? Uraraka asked, and Peter could see the question marks floating over their heads. Laplace operator multiplied by the sought real function of a manifold, equal to the given real function. Momo replied on the dot, conjuring a pencil and paper from her arm, writing it down. She had a slight smirk on her face, and Peter couldn't help but mirror it. If you want to go deeper, she said as she wrote down the functions, we can go into the Euclidean space. She made another similar equation, with Laplace flipped upside down with a square root. Kirishima and Uraraka blinked, while Izuku tilted his head. Oh, I know that one. Peter chuckled. May I? As if on cue, Momo handed him the pencil as she resumed eating and he took the paper. Well, you can go even deeper than that, since the Laplace operator is these functions squared multiplied by x, y, and z. Peter spoke out as he made a bigger equation, which also applies to the sought real function and the given real function too. Momo nodded. But, do you know how you can reach the equation needed to reach the Laplace equation? When the given real function, defined as f equals 0, Peter answered on the dot. But the truest way to achieve Poisson's equation, Momo mused as she took back the paper and began writing, is using Green's function. Oh, she knows her stuff, Karen added in his ear. I like her. And that's a whole nother ballpark which involves finding the linear differential operator defined on a domain. To solve it you have to write. Peter paused from writing down another function on the remaining space the piece of paper had left. Both him and Momo turning and seeing steam coming out of Kirishima, Izuku and Uraraka's ears. Are you two aliens from outer space? Uraraka asked dryly, eyes wide. Have to be, I didn't understand a thing. Izuku added, eyes looking like plates. Kirishima seemed to be the first to recover from the math babble. Man, I didn't get a word of what you two were saying, but that sounded like super smart math stuff. He clapped his hands together. Will you please help me get over math? The Pythagorean theorem is killing me. Peter blinked before he looked back at Momo. Then the two laughed, Momo covering her mouth behind her hand while doing so. You got it, dude. We can split on math, if that's cool by you, Momo-san. The more heads the better, Peter-san, and Kirishima-san, of course. We'll go over our math class curriculum together when we get the group assembled. Could we do it tomorrow? I have plans with my family tonight, Uraraka said as she rubbed the back of her head. Alright, Kirishima yelled. Written test, here I come. With this training I will prove my worth as a man's man and conquer you like the first climbers of Everest. The group laughed to themselves, and Peter sighed, smiling happily. He then noticed Momo look at him. Oh, Peter-san, before I forget. Momo reached into her school bag and brought out a piece of paper with names written on it. She handed it to the American boy as Peter inspected it. It was a list of names and law firms, phone numbers and emails included. And in English too. Here, what's this? Patent attorneys, Momo stated as the others perked up. For your webbing and support gear. Your gear was made on your own. Yes. Sort of. My suits were given to me. But my web shooters and fluid I made myself. So I can file a patent for these. Don't I have to be an adult for that? Momo then chuckled. Not at all. Japan's copyright and patent laws allow even teenage inventors to claim their own creations. Hook up with any of those attorneys and they'll ensure that your creations are your own. And when you become a pro hero, you can make income on the side selling your gadgets and that web fluid. Momo declared brightly. Peter beamed as he looked at it. He never really thought about it, but she had a point. Just make a photo of this and I'll make the appropriate emails asking for billing rates, Karen said in his ear. Peter obliged, taking his phone and taking several photos of each name. The American boy let out an exhale. Mr. Stark probably had a fleet of attorneys with his creations and company too. He hasn't thought of any of that since, well, he was just a kid, yet Momo had the foresight to look far ahead and do just that. Oh, now you're going to make some serious dough when you graduate, Kirishima exclaimed. You're going to be such a man amongst men. All that funding helping your career in heroism. I gotta trademark my own gear. I'm sure you can trademark your hero name. But not your gear, I'm afraid, as most of us got all our gear from the support companies who have deals with UA. Momo corrected. Good thing she looked out for us. Karen whispered in Peter's ear as Kirishima nodded at the black-haired beauty's explanation. Yep, he muttered back under his breath. I'll go over these and send out feelers on these. Thanks a ton, Momo-san. The girl's smile seemed to widen, genuinely pleased and happy. You're welcome, Peter-san. Peter nodded. He was about to speak before Kirishima waved his hand. Seiyu, when are we going to do the study group thing? Me and Uraraka are in the same boat, with me and my parents going to go out to eat tonight, so I'll be busy. But tomorrow onward I should be free. We can start it tomorrow. Can we? Peter asked, looking towards Momo, who nodded. We can. It's for the best to give everyone a day to check their schedules and all. Sounds good. Midoriya, Uraraka, you wanna come? Peter asked. The brown-haired girl perked up. Don't see why not. Studying at my place is pretty boring and tough, but if I can learn with the smartest kids in the class, then I'll take it. The girl said with a punch to the air. My mom should be okay with it, but she has been missing me since I've been away for 2 weeks. Izuku replied. But I'll check in with her. It's not like I'm spending the night or anything. He got out his phone and began to text. Got some bites. Ashido, Kaminari, Ajiro and Siro are interested in joining. Karen replied. As if on cue, Peter noticed Momo look at her phone and he looked at his smartwatch, all with confirmations from his fellow classmates. Plus Kirishima, that made 5 excluding himself and Momo. And Jiru-san will be checking with her parents first. Wonderful, Momo exclaimed. Now let's do our best, everyone. Yeah, everyone else besides Peter said, who smiled softly as he stared at the beaming black-haired beauty. He looked down on his phone, going over the emails Karen had typed up in milliseconds to send to the attorneys. Later that day, it was the end of the day as Izuku walked through the halls of UA. They'd had their rescue training exercise, and he was able to avoid Siro by a hair. Edshot's training paid off immensely in terms of Parker movement through Battle Center Gamma. He had gotten typical compliments from just about everyone, including Peter and Uraraka, and normally he would be on the way home for nice homemade katsudon. Except he wasn't, as All Might had whispered to him about talking after school, about the truth of One for All. Izuku's mind began to race as he recounted back to where he met All Might in person for the first time and was roped into his secret on the rooftop that day. All Might had fought a villain at some point in the past and was wounded, so much so that it affected even his quirk usage and was the reason for his skeletal appearance. The quirk could be given to others as well. Wait, All Might had given him his hair, which meant he had to pass on his DNA. Did that mean had Stain cut him and licked his blue? Izuku's blood turned cold. No wonder All Might was so furious. It all made sense. Izuku cupped a fist and bashed against his forehead, once, twice, 3 times. Stupid, 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 he uttered under his breath. On top of all the other things too, like concern for his well-being and how to get better as a hero. Izuku sighed. He noticed All Might's office, and the light was on as he opened the door, and there was the skeletal symbol of peace sitting on his sofa. Have a seat. he said, and Izuku gulped as he set down his backpack. I have 2 things to tell you. So tense. He heard the blonde man sigh. Lately you've been through a lot, but you have improved by leaps and bounds, young Midoriya, he said, still hunched over. Well done. Izuku walked over and took a seat on the other couch across from him, feeling pride swell in his chest. Gee, thank you, All Might. He meant it. Praise from his idol meant the world to him, and yet, you seem worried. Anything on your mind? Weren't they going to talk about One for All? Well, Izuku looked to the side. I just remembered about Stain and, well, my quirk and... All Might opened his mouth and pointed at his tongue. Stain, his quirk revolves around blood, right? The blood of others. Yes, Izuku stated. I know how you were so angry back then. Stain could have stolen One for All. Just like that time on the beach when you gave me your hair and said... And the hours of training, looking into the mirror. His face scrunched up, shadows formed and a big toothy smile appeared. A perfect replication of All Might's visage. Eat this and... Young Midoriya, All Might interrupted, looking distressed. Izuku tilted his head. Don't ever do that again. The green-haired teen's face returned to normal, and he could feel the blood rush to his face. Please. Sorry. Was I not accurate? Did I not get why your face right? Not at all. In fact, it's too accurate. Sheesh. All Might shook his head. Never mind that, but you don't have to worry. Even if Stain had nicked you, he wouldn't be able to take One for All from you. One for All can only be transferred if the current bearer wills it through his or her consent. It can't be stolen forcibly, however, it can be given to an unwilling recipient. Essentially, it's all on the predecessor, not the successor. Izuku nodded. That made some sense. A more modern term for your youngsters is VOICEOVER. Receiving chocolates on White Day from a very clingy and love-struck girl, even though you aren't interested. That helped paint a better picture. Izuku thought of a girl handing off a box of chocolates, or rather, shoving it into a flustered teenage All Might's chest. Yeah, it does. Good. One for All is a unique quirk. So unique, it has an origin story. Izuku perked up, his eyes widening as he gave his mentor his full attention. You see, One for All was born from another quirk. Its name. His countenance darkened. All for One, a quirk that allows its user to steal other quirks, as well as grant quirks to others. All for One, the way he spoke that in English, and the naming. All for One, meaning everything was for this guy to take for him or herself. All Might nodded. Yes, back during the advent of quirks, society was in complete upheaval. The status quo was changing under a society that couldn't adapt fast enough. What defined one as a human became lost. Civil unrest broke out all over the world. Racism not for the color of one's skin or their creed or religion, but the sheer fact of those who had a quirk and everyone else who didn't. Some even used religion to attack those with quirks or even the quirkless. He sighed. It was a modern dark age. Humanity was destroying itself back then, as the progress of society came to a grinding halt. Izuku nodded, remembering his history classes and the articles he read online. Without the rise of quirks, humanity would be in space by now, is what I've heard. Izuku mused, looking out the window into the dusky sky. Yes, in that dark age, there was one man who brought an end to the chaos and unrest here in Japan. All Might's eyes narrowed. With his power, he was able to steal quirks from others and give them to those he favored in return for loyalty. With it, he spread his influence accordingly. People got elected to high positions in the Diet and other places of government. Others disappeared overnight without a trace. Order was brought to Japan, but corruption and villainy was rampant in the streets regardless. Countless wicked acts were committed by him as he ascended a throne of corpses behind a government of puppets. He became Japan's king from the shadows, a legitimate overlord of evil. A shadow king. I heard rumors online, but I thought it was just conspiracy theories, like those copy-paste stories you see on the web. Izuku mentioned as All Might took a break to drink from a water bottle. There's nothing mentioned like that in the textbooks at all. Is the Yakuza mentioned in history textbooks? There's an old adage that history is written by the victors after all. Or rather, the ones at the top decide what gets written and what gets excluded. All Might replied wryly. So how is this connected to One for All? Remember when I said All for One could give quirks too? All Might said. And that he gave them in return for absolute loyalty. Well, if some chose to resist or not be of use to him, he would give them multiple quirks. Izuku gulped. The tone he spoke of was full of dread. The burden of bearing multiple quirks in one body is too much to bear for a single person. Those who were found had become lifeless puppets, unable to speak, with the skin around their skull deteriorating. Just like the Naomu. Izuku's heart stopped. That's right, the League of Villains back then said they were out to kill All Might. That was their original goal. So that dark-skinned brain-exposed monster back then was once a person, a human being. But there was a case where someone managed to survive such a state, where the blending of quirks resulted in a mutation. All Might continued. The Shadow King had a younger brother who was quirkless. He was born sickly and frail, but his sense of justice was strong. So strong, he opposed his brother whenever he could in his capacity. So the elder brother decided to give his weak sibling a quirk, a power stalker. Whether he gave it to him out of a sense of love or as a sick joke is unknown. Knowing him, probably the latter. The skeletal man then broke out in a smirk. Such a quirk given to one who is quirkless should be useless, right? No, in fact, the Shadow King was completely fooled, for his little brother had a quirk. It was useless on its own, and no one, not even the younger brother, had known. His quirk allowed him to pass on his quirk onto others. Izuku's eyes widened, his mouth dropped. He said it was a mutation, which meant, yes, I can see it in your eyes, young Midoriya, that young mind piecing it together. All Might said with a victorious grin. The two quirks, the transfer quirk and the power stalker quirk combined into one. One for all. Incredible. Izuku whispered, gobsmacked. All Might chuckled as he took a deep breath. It is an ironic tale, no. Justice always seems to be born from evil. It's sad, but it's true. So, if I am guessing this right, All Might. Izuku gulped. This villain who has all for one. Was he? He pointed at his stomach. Wait, if he was around during the advent of quirks then. Yes, that person has forsaken his human name, going by the name of his quirk. Obviously, he had no intention of passing the throne to another, so at some point he acquired a quirk that stopped aging. Essentially, he has eternal youth, and hundreds, if not thousands of quirks at his command. He became a symbol of evil. The younger brother knew this, and he knew that as he was, he couldn't fight all for one. At least, not yet. He decided to pass on his quirk to one he trusted, giving them his mission to defeat his older brother. And that person too gave their quirk from one person to the next throughout the generations. It was weak then, but as time passed, it was like a snowball rolling down a hill, becoming stronger and stronger, until it was ready. And it was my turn. You fought him then. Did you defeat him? Izuku asked, hopeful that this tale had some closure, some semblance of a happy ending. All Might's sigh as his shoulders slumped confirmed the opposite. Yes and no. I did my best to kill him for all the evil he has committed over the years. I beat him, but he survived. I was in no condition that day to pursue. His hand came up to his face, the other rubbing his side as if feeling a nostalgic phantom pain. Considering the Namu that attacked the USJ, combined with the sudden attack on Hasu, and the autopsy reports of the monsters coming back as people who had disappeared, all but confirms that the true leader of the League of Villains is not Shigaraki Tamura. All Might growled. It has always been all for one. One for all was created for the specific purpose of defeating all for one. All Might sighed, looking down at the ground in shame. And you must one day fight this evil. All because I failed. Izuku did his best to soothe his racing heart as he had clenched his pants during All Might's discussion. His mentor seemed to have noticed his distress and sat up. I apologize if this got a little bit dark, but don't be, Izuku said, gulping as he gripped his fists. I know what I have to do now, he said, teeth clenched. I have to get stronger and stronger still. I remember what you said that day, All Might. That I have to be better. He sat up straight, his green eyes burning with determination as he met his mentor's dark blue gaze. With you at my side, I can do anything. There was a pregnant pause in there that made Izuku look to the side. Well, that's how I feel, anyway. He then looked back to All Might. All Might, I will be better. I will surpass you. I will defeat him. All Might was quiet, eyes wide in disbelief before he placed a hand over his mouth, looking at the floor. He conflicted for a moment, torn before he took a deep breath. Midoriya, thank you. There was silence throughout the room as All Might and Izuku remained still, and the skeletal man sighed and leaned back, looking up at the ceiling. Then he looked at his desk a bit, where his laptop lied as well as some framed photographs. Okay, this was getting a bit awkward now. Well, I appreciate you telling me this story, All Might. I'll never forget it and I better get home and... Young Midoriya, All Might said. Are you going to be busy this summer? Izuku blinked. Well, the final exams are next week. I passed those and Aizawa said that I am able to come to the summer camp this August. August, you say? All Might turned, before he chuckled and a warm grin broke out at his face. So late June and early July you're free. I did say I had two things to tell you. One was of course, the origin of All for One. Yeah. Izuku nodded. I'm free. What's the second thing? And in a flash, All Might bulked up into the towering symbol of peace and on his feet. Perfect. Now, young Midoriya. He pointed down at him. Izuku clammed up, eyes wide. Why yes, the second subject I wanted to talk to you about is that I will be doing proper training with you. If you are to surpass me, I must teach you everything I know. For that, I will be taking you to some of the greatest training facilities and ensuring you make the greatest connections a hero like you can ask for," All Might declared. "After all, if you are to become greater than the symbol of peace, you must be able to use any and all advantages you have and are given. And the best place for that is for you to be acquainted with my first sidekick." Izuku's heart swelled as he stood up on his feet. "You mean?" "Yes, indeed. I will be taking you to I Expo at I Island. There you will meet my sidekick, David Shield. And there, you will undergo plenty of training at the hero training facilities the island possesses." Wow! Izuku's eyes were beginning to water. I Island, the greatest technology center in the world. I can't believe it. What will my mother say, and if she will let me? "Well, you're correct there, young Midoriya." All Might beamed. "Talk it over with her, and I will send you an email of my invitation to you. You can share with her, and that will no doubt put her mind at ease over her son traveling abroad. And with me along no less. And most of all," he placed a hand on his shoulder, "you and I share a bond that goes beyond blood, that goes beyond generations, across time." His dark eyes shone with warmth as he smiled, his giant hand gripping softly. "I will teach you everything I know. One day, all that is mine will be yours, young Midoriya." Izuku grinned ear to ear and nodded. "I'll do my best." After school was done, hours later, Momo took a deep breath, feeling her lungs stretch before breathing out slowly. It had been a good day. It had been nice to see all her friends again after 2 weeks of relative absence. As nice as it was, she was honestly a little tired. Nina especially was exhausting in her enthusiasm after she learned about the planned study group. Right now, all she wanted was to go home, take a nice hot shower and maybe read a book before bed. But the drive from the school to her home was slower today. A road closed for maintenance forced Madu to take a detour. Momo leaned against the door, head bumping into the cool glass as she watched the people pass by, each one slipping across her vision as they moved at the outer edges of the park. Then, something caught her eye. She did a double take, blinking almost stupidly before she realized what she was seeing. "Stop the car." Madu was confused. "Miss, stop the car." Her driver didn't need to be told a third time. Madu slammed on the brakes and Momo undid her seatbelt as fast as she could before rushing out of the vehicle, barely hearing Madu's surprised squeak behind her. Good heavens. She moved quickly across the street, wincing as other cars honked their horns in protest to her sudden actions. She made it to the sidewalk, marching into the park itself. She moved closer, suddenly unsure and trying to verify what she had seen before she made a fool of herself. But it was him. He still hadn't noticed her. "Ida-san." He jerked where he sat, head snapping up, blinking in her direction as though he didn't quite understand what he was seeing before he recognized her. "Oh, Yaoyorozu-san." Momo shifted where she stood, suddenly feeling awkward. She'd been worried. They all had, especially after Ida hadn't been in class today, but none of them had seen him that night. She had, except now she didn't know what to say. "We were worried." She finally settled on the simple truth. "You weren't in class today." He looked down, head hanging again, elbows resting on his knees. He wasn't in his school uniform. Was he out wandering all day? "I don't think I'll be returning to class, Yaoyorozu-san." Her heart skipped a beat. "Oh no, you're quitting," she breathed. After that night, it wasn't surprising. Not really. She wasn't sure if she could have continued after that horror. But Ida wasn't her. Ida was a member of the Ida family, 3 generations of heroes. He held himself to such a high standard. Tried to be an example. The thought of him quitting was, frankly, horrifying. He shrugged, eyes to the ground. "I don't think I can be a hero, Yaoyorozu-san. Not after what I did." The silence was long, a chasm opening up between them, and Momo knew by instinct, if nothing else, that there was a crossroads here. She tried to think of what a hero would say, what All Might would say. Something to make the situation better, to convince the person as to what they had to do, what they could do. All Might came to her at her lowest after all. What would a hero say? But she wasn't All Might. She wasn't a hero, not really. She was just Momo. All she could say was the truth. I didn't think I deserved to be a hero." Ida looked up. She continued, pushing through before he could interrupt her or she could stop herself. "When I was young, I hated my mother." She paused, then shook her head. "No, not hate. That's too strong maybe. I resented her. She was always so controlling, always wanted me to do things her way, to her standards." Ida stared at her, clearly paying attention and being polite enough to not interrupt, for which she was grateful as it let her organize her jumbled mess of words into a coherent thought. "She wanted me to go into the family business, wanted me to use my quirk to make money on the side, like she would have if she could. I didn't want to, out of spite more than anything. In truth, I wanted to be a musician when I was a little girl, and then, somewhere, that changed, and I wanted to be a hero. It may have been watching one of All Might's interviews, or the sight of seeing pro heroes in action helping others. She didn't know when. She took a breath, forcing her clenched fists to stop shaking. Someone who could use their quirk, just like she wanted, but for everything other than making financial gain. That's how I wanted to get back at her. Momo looked down to the street, her eyes shadowed and feeling shame burn across her mind. Saving people didn't matter to me. Being a hero didn't matter to me. I was motivated by resentment, Ida-san. She looked at him, meeting his eyes, and she was grateful to not see judgment there, just a calm stoicism as he listened. I didn't deserve to be a hero, she said. Tenya didn't say a word. I thought she would be angry, furious. But she wasn't. She remembered her own quiet surprise at the change in her mother's focus without even a word. She turned all her energy into getting me to UA. She was the one that got me the recommendation to enter. And then I was accepted when I passed the recommendation exam. And I wondered if I was worthy of being a hero. What kind of hero could I be if I was just doing this out of spite? She didn't wait for an answer. Frankly, she didn't want one. But I was already there, already accepted, and so I promised myself I would do better, that I'd live up to what it really means to be a hero. She shook her head. What I'm saying, Ida-san, is that even if you don't think you're worthy of being a hero, you can always keep working to make yourself worthy and live up to the expectation placed on you. She bowed low. Please don't quit unless you think that goal is beyond your reach, because if it's not, you can become a hero, Ida-san. She didn't wait for his answer. Her heart was thundering in her chest, and to face any kind of judgment on his features now would be too much. Please excuse me. The heiress rushed back to the recently parked car and to the mild chastisement of the worried Matu. There we go, Todoroki, Fayumi said as she came into the kitchen, carrying a tray that contained her little brother's favorite meal. A nice bowl of cold soba. She set the tray down on the table, Shoto sitting across from her patiently as he sipped from some herbal tea. Thank you, Shoto muttered as he received the tray. The white-haired woman smiled as she took her seat, her own dinner cooling down in front of her. A nice bowl of ramen with tamago and pork. Not a problem, Shoto, Fayumi replied as she held her metal chopsticks. Shoto had been with Dad at Hasu. He looked so relieved after the sports festival, she could tell. Yet now, he looked as if his mind was in a faraway place, and his body was going through the motions now. As she slurped up some noodles, she waited until Shoto had done the same on his end. So, Shoto, how's school? Good, he replied, looking at the table as he paused in eating. Did you do anything cool in hero training? Take any pop quizzes? Fayumi smiled awkwardly. Shoto usually fell short when it came to conversations, and to be fair, she wasn't all that great either. We have final exams next week. I'll be studying for that, the twin-haired boy replied, his tone low. We did rescue training. I did all right. Fayumi nodded, taking a sip of tea as she felt a lump form in her throat. Shoto, do you want to talk about, well, your internship? She asked. Shoto paused in his eating. Father taught me well and... That's not what I meant, Fayumi asked, cutting him off. That night, in Hasu, she swallowed, taking a deep breath. Do you want to talk about it? Shoto was silent, not touching his food. He opened his mouth, as if wanting to speak. He closed his mouth. And not really. Shoto has never stammered. At least, not in a long time. Shoto, you can talk to me. I don't want to talk about it, he uttered, his tone hard as he gripped his chopsticks. His face looked pained, looking away as he clenched his teeth, clearly trying to suppress a memory. Fayumi reached across the table and grabbed his hand softly. Let me help you. Her younger brother opened his mouth, then closed it as his eyes darted around in thought. The sound of heavy footsteps and a sliding door silenced Shoto, and his vulnerable visage was replaced by a stoic expression. Fayumi turned to see her father, the flame hero Endeavor, standing in the doorway, his flames off. Finishing up dinner, he asked gruffly. Shoto took his chopsticks and picked up one big helping of noodles before slurping them up. Just now, he said, swallowing as Endeavor walked through the room. Thanks for the dinner, sis. Can you put the rest in a container for tomorrow? Shoto, he always finished her soba dishes. He stood up and patted himself down. If you'll excuse me. Hold on a minute, Shoto, Endeavor said, crossing his arms. I came this way to talk to you. Don't feel like it. Endeavor's eye twitched at his son's retort. Cleaning up, then bed. He didn't bother looking his father in the eye. Fayumi looked worried, expecting her father to lash out for such insubordination. Yet he did not, in fact taking a small step aside. Get your rest then, Endeavor muttered, and Shoto walked out without a word. The tall red-haired man saw his son retreat down the hall before turning, meeting the narrowed eyes of his only daughter. He said nothing. couldn't have waited 5 minutes or taken the scenic route. Fuyumi huffed as she blew on her chopstick serving full of ramen and slurped it up. Endeavor said nothing as he stood in the doorway, his face unmoving and eyes to the floor. Dad. He perked up. What happened at Hasu? She uttered, setting down her chopsticks as she turned to face her hulk of a father. Endeavor looked at her, straight in the eye. My branch team and I responded to a crisis call. We acted to save as many lives as we could. To not bring along someone of Shoto's caliber would have resulted in more Namu escaping the area and caused more casualties. Yet it was still a massacre, Fuyumi retorted, and she felt a sense of vindication when she saw his face twitch. The armor cracked, then revulsion came rushing through her. Damn it, now she felt awful. What are you doing here anyway? The white-haired woman asked, sighing and turning away as she plucked up her egg yolk and mixed it into her broth, pork, and noodles. I came here to tell you something of importance. Endeavor reached into his armor, pulling out an envelope as he walked over and handed it to the white-haired girl. Fuyumi took it and swiftly opened it and saw. Plane tickets. What's this for? Tickets to I Island. I am going to be having a business meeting there with a potential support company in America. They pitched me a new armor design, so we will be going to I Island during I Expo to test it. I am taking Shoto with me as well. Endeavor crossed his arms. If he is to surpass me properly, he will need to meet and set up connections. My name will go far in helping him down the line and getting every single edge he can take. Fuyumi looked at the tickets inside before closing the envelope. I don't think he wants anything to do with you right now. And you're right. Endeavor reached over and used his finger to reopen the envelope. That's why you're coming too. What? Fuyumi's eyes widened as she recounted the tickets. 3 of them. Her dad hadn't wanted anything to do with her ever since she couldn't live up to his expectations as a child. Because of that, Shoto had to carry the torch. Before her, Natsuo. And before him, Taoya. Yes, you're coming. Endeavor closed his eyes and took the envelope back. You'll be watching over Shoto while I conduct business. When you're at the island, you can do whatever you want with him. Attend the expo, go to Tekka Mechanica, I don't care. He placed it in his armor. Fuyumi was silent. So, that's it? She asked, looking up at her father. Yes, he turned. Because right now, he needs something to take his mind off of that incident. A proper distraction. School will only go so far. He looked back, his hard green eyes looking into her brown ones. You know this. Fuyumi took a deep breath, then she noticed her father spot the soba bowl she had on the table. He walked over, grabbing a pair of metal chopsticks from the kitchen counter and taking a knee. He plucked several noodles and cupped the food, bringing it to his lips as Fuyumi quirked her eye. He slurped them up, and he nodded. Cold soba was his favorite dish too. This is good, he mentioned, taking the chopsticks and placing them in the sink. I'll be heading back to the office. Need to finish looking over plans for a new branch office in Sapporo. Lock up after I'm gone, and be sure to tell Shoto everything in the morning. He'll be more receptive if it's from you. I'll even be on a different flight as well. You two will be together when you fly out of Narita. Sure, Fuyumi said, and as Endeavor walked past, he patted her shoulder. The woman perked up and turned. Those emerald eyes, usually as sharp as daggers, were soft for a moment. Good night, Fuyumi. Fuyumi looked away, saying nothing as she held onto her arm. Her father's hand left her shoulder and she heard him depart the dining room, his footfalls heavy behind the wall. Yet that wasn't the direction of the front lawn. It was towards Taoya's room. Closing her eyes, Fuyumi went back to finishing her ramen before it got too cold. Let the world know that Peter Parker tried to ignore a certain pink-haired girl. There was a fleeting thought that May wouldn't be too surprised to see him in the support office this late, now that he finally got the chance to implement some new ideas since the internship ended. So when he felt May get uncomfortably close, he tried not to look too creeped out when he turned to see her magnifying eyes staring back at him. She was literally resting her chin on his shoulder as he looked down at his device. You're still here? She asked. He frowned slightly at the disbelief in her tone. Why wouldn't I be? Just curious, she said in a sing-song voice. Face way too close. Oh, she pointed at his holographic blueprint. We could add this in, get some extra armor. Too bulky. Oh, then maybe thrusters to give you flight. Too heavy. And then, we can use cables on your hips to help with additional maneuverability. And nay, I have my webs, and equip blades on your wrists. Oh, and baby number 127, exploding harpoons. You're not even listening, are you? Peter turned around, and the pink-haired girl was already back at her workstation, working on another one of her babies. Man, she was fast. He sighed. He didn't know what he expected. Eccentric didn't even begin to describe May, but dedicated sure did. which is what he'd need to be if he wanted to finish this particular endeavor. In front of him, several holographic screens, courtesy of Karen's projectors, displayed the different sections of the spider suit. By God, if he could have had this when he was trying to get through the suit's protocols back in that hotel, it would have gone 100 times faster. Throwing away the basic design, there wasn't anything that needed changing in the mask or the outer suit. No, the big thing would be the web shooters. The holographic design left, leaving a multi-section display of the web shooters. Every piece was outlined and highlighted, letting him see both the clock and the inner workings, so to speak. "Hey Karen," Peter said, moving the hologram of the web shooter's power system. "What would we need to put a charge from the reactor into the web lining?" Behind him, Peter was vaguely aware of the sounds of work pausing for a second. "Are you hoping to make a new electro-webbing?" Karen asked. "Sort of. I was hoping to see if we could find a way to have webbing hold a charge," Peter clarified. Shocking someone that was connected to him was all well and good. But what would happen if someone like Stain fought against him again? He couldn't just hope that he would be quick enough to dodge them, or have great backup in Midoriya. And with all the metal sticking out of their bodies and with weapons in their hands, a little shock to those parts would go a long way. If you wanted to make a sustained charge, you would need to have the webbing be capable of grounding itself on whatever it connects to, Karen said. Peter nodded. That meant that he needed to work on the formula. Or you could make a different grounder, May said, hammering away on some poor piece of metal. Think about it. You fire the web, then you shoot something else to hold the charge, ground it, and spread the charge through whatever the webbing is connected to. She raised a hand. You don't get shocked. Don't burn your suit's power, plus you can use your webs still, and then let the grounded charge web do its job. Peter thought about it. It would make things easier in the short term. Yeah, but the formula still needs to change if I want to make it an all-in-one webbing, and have to work on a device that can contain energy needed to send a proper electric charge. I didn't say you had to go with it, May chirped. Just start with a building block or something. The Hadron Collider didn't build itself in a day. It's basically like an electro-landmine with spider webs. It was, actually, a good point, and a good analogy. Thanks, May, Peter said with a shrug and a grin. Karen, can you bring up any designs on what she talked about? I can fabricate some blueprints, the AI said, the holographic pictures morphing to become a series of equations that flashed and disappeared almost faster than Peter could blink. So what's this baby of yours going to be for? May asked, a pair of pliers in her hand to rip off the circuits of a circuit board. Thought you hero course people didn't have to make anything for your finals. We don't, Peter answered. This is something that I want to do now, get a decent start on before I head to I Island this summer. A screwdriver and a circuit board clattered to the ground. Peter raised an eyebrow at the mechanic as was she trembling? Why, you're going to I Island, May exclaimed, her eyes flashing enough light to light up a city by themselves. Peter had to jerk his head back so the girl couldn't get too close. He even leaned back since she was leaning so far forward, his wide eyes meeting her own wide target irises. No personal space at all with her. Why, yeah, I got an offer to attend the expo they're showing. Won it at the sports festival. Aw, that's so lucky, May said, pouting at the information. You sound like you want to go, Peter said. Of course I want to go, May screamed. She spun around, eyes twinkling as she stared off into the distance. I Island is the home of the greatest babies in the world. All of the greatest support contractors and businesses go there to practice their craft, to work with the best and make the greatest babies that the world has ever seen. And I Expo is the biggest convention that has all the support companies show off their stuff. The culture festival here in UA apparently is their own support exposi which is based off of it, and I'm thinking ahead of what kind of babies I can make to display there. If I go to I Expo, I can get so many ideas, so much inspiration. My muse wouldn't know what to do with itself. May cheered as she twirled, as if dancing on the spot. And with it, the more babies I can create to help others. Peter started. He'd never heard of this before. One would think that May would bring it up, but apparently, her aspirations for I Island went as deep as they could be for someone in the mechanical world, which brought something else up to him. Hey May, Peter said, making the girl's head snap to him. Her daydream broken but wide eyes and manic grin still plastered on her face. Are you doing anything this summer? The pinkette tilted her head, thinking. Nope, she said, popping the word. Just working away here, got to keep the wheels nice and greased. Then you want to spend the first month going to I Island? With the question, May practically froze. That grin of hers disappeared, her mouth forming into an O. I was just thinking, Peter said, rubbing the back of his head. I never really did anything to say thank you for helping me get Karen back, and I'm allowed to bring a +1 on my trip, so if you want to come, I can take you. There was a pause, and Peter was pretty sure that May didn't even breathe. Her eye twitched. She didn't even blink. Then, after her mouth closed, a smile etched its way onto May's face, split all the way to her ears. "There's nothing about that sentence that I don't love." Peter blinked, his turn and tilting his head. "So is that Of course I want to go." May squealed. "This is the best day ever. I get to go to I Island," she declared, pumping up her fists in victory. Then she gasped, her grimy gloves on her cheeks as they left black smudge marks. Her gasp sounded ghastly too. "I'm going to I Island. I need a project that I can show everyone. I need to make an Uber baby." With a speed that no one would expect out of May's quirk, the Pinkette was rummaging through her workstation, throwing out blueprint after blueprint as she searched for the right one. She scanned them all before she pulled on a specific glove, turned on a button, and a holographic display appeared. She tapped on a folder and cracked open a massive array of PDF blueprints as she got to scanning them one at a time with a swipe of her hand. He could hear her giddy, constrained laughter as he watched her bounce on the balls of her feet, barely containing her excitement. Peter gave a small chuckle at the sight, and behind him, Karen's monitor beeped. "You know, if it were anyone else, I would think they were about to pass out with how hard they were going." "It's something," he said. "You can say it's kind of weird, Peter." "She's excited." Peter smiled, shaking his head as May continued to giggle like a kid on Christmas morning. Let her have her fun. There was something about watching something grow that All For One couldn't put his finger on. Maybe it was the natural state of humans, to have pride in watching the things they created grow, and become something beyond what anyone, even he, could imagine. Free from the evolutionary failure of aging, All For One had experienced the feeling dozens, possibly hundreds of times, and it had grown rather dull. Yet, watching this particular creation grow, it was different. A strange mixture of emotions that All For One had not felt in a long time. Interest and excitement came to him in equal measures. Strapped in his medical chair as he was, there was little he could do beyond hearing through the screen as Tamura worked through another Namu, going by the sound of flesh becoming ash, and the strangled cry of his creation. The artificial human practically screamed as the young villain used his quirk to atomize the creature faster than All For One remembered him being able to. He could sense Tamura's glee as he heard his protégé's dark laughter. He could see it now, Tamura smiling, his cracked lips and yellowed teeth demanding more even without saying a word. "That's the 5th one this week," Dr. Garaki Kyudai mused, tapping on his tablet. "You have plenty of low ends, All For One dismissed. If anything, young Tamura is clearing out the trash that wouldn't be of use to us anyway. They can be replaced with just a simple vagrant off the street." Garaki didn't say anything, but All For One could feel him relent. He knew that while the good doctor didn't appreciate the Namu being used like this, the growth in Tamura's quirk was fascinating. It was rare for a quirk to evolve within someone, but All For One had seen it happen a few times. In his youth, he thought that such things were nothing but a fluke, a rush of power brought out by a body's dying gasps. Yet, as he watched Tamura, he found himself thinking that it was desperation, not fear, that brought out a quirk's true power. When there was nothing left to lose, nothing else but the battle before someone, then they could shine. Desperation, or perhaps drive. Yes, a drive to satisfy one's hatred. Simple as her quirk was, the last great wielder of One For All proved it well enough. A divine comedy it might have been. It still proved a worthy enough example to compare to. "He's asking to go after specific targets again," Garaki sighed. "He just doesn't get it, does he?" "I heard from Kurogiri," All For One replied as he rested in his chair. "You're not concerned?" the doctor asked. "It is of little consequence," All For One said. Like most young villains, he's finally found a tangible outlet for his vendetta, and like all teenagers, he's impatient. And like all teenagers, how long till it takes him to strike out on his own? Or, like all teenagers, do something so boneheaded there's no correcting his mistake? All For One turned his head as far as the medical tubes would allow. He couldn't see the good doctor, but there was something unsettling about being looked at with his hollowed eyes. He raised a single hairless eyebrow. "Doctor, do you think I haven't predicted just that?" Garaki quickly shook his head. "Of course not. Nothing could get past your intuition." Garaki paused. "I am simply conflicted." "Oh? Then speak your mind, doctor. Let me hear what conflicts you so." All For One rested his chin on his fist, smirking in amusement. The doctor flinched, but it wasn't in surprise of the declaration. All For One was nothing if not diplomatic when the occasion suited him. Only a fool would think that he could anticipate everything. And after so long, All For One knew the value of hearing the opinions of like-minded individuals. He never would have become the true ruler of Japan had he not. No, this was slight fear, which only interested All For One more. It is just that, all these years of nurturing the boy, you never let me give him any enhancements or other quirks. The boy is compatible with a few, and his mentality, while wild, is controllable. He's more like an attack dog if anything. I fail to see the problem. All for One shrugged. I am simply thinking, why shower him with your favor when there are others, one in particular that could be used and be far easier to control? All for One paused. It was an honest question, one that a part of him respected the doctor for asking. It was rather odd of All for One picking favorites like this. Perhaps it was the connection to All Might that drove him, and his other options lacked that visceral edge to them. Or maybe it was that Tamura, in another life, could have been like his dear younger brother. He does have a unique physical resemblance. Or perhaps it was that Shimura Tenko was someone who had all the chances to be a hero, if only someone other than All for One reached out their hand that day 15 years ago. Do you remember how long it took me to carve out my empire, Doctor? All for One asked. Shigaraki didn't answer, tapping on his tablet. A few decades, if rumors are to be believed. But I'll be generous and say half a century. And how long did it take All Might to tear it all down? All for One asked again. He gave his confidant no time to answer. 8 years. Such was his influence. A symbol of what everyone could be, what a normal man could strive to be. Imagine the stain on society of a symbol that rose to that level. He raised a hand, practically holding up the monitor that showed a laughing Tamura as he punched the low-end's corpse, yelling Midoriya, Yaoyorozu, Todoroki Parky ear, with each swing of his fists, a symbol that shows what is possible, what can rise from the shadows no matter how bright the light. That as the sun shines, an equally crushing darkness comes with it. It is that feeling, that realization, that people will come to. No matter what, even if 1,000 All Mights rose from One for All, it would only make more villains to oppose them. And you believe the boy will be able to show that? Shigaraki said, looking at the screen as Tamura howled with sadistic glee. I have faith that he will rise to the challenge and tear down All Might's false peace, All for One said. And if you don't believe, across his eyeless and scarred visage, the symbol of evil grinned. Have faith knowing that there are others who will. Others in this world who were born wicked. Ha man, this week has been aching my brain. Kirishima groaned. Peter chuckled a bit as he walked alongside the red-haired boy from the bus drop-off lot. School was going slow on Saturday as it was a study period and most of the general studies students were at home. But for those in the hero course, they had access to the facilities to train for the practical final exam. For this exam, Peter and Kirishima had agreed to have their studying times at Momo's house in order to practice and stretch their legs, as it were. Speaking of which, Peter had been floored upon seeing Momo's estate before the rest of the gang had arrived. Momo was there waiting for him and the two hashed out a proper schedule going with 2 study periods, a break in between, and a movie night. Least those movies we saw last night were rad in their own right. That Ripley was one hell of a man ... lie woman. Yeah, Ripley is darn cool. Hagakure was in front of me, but I could hear her squeaking a lot during the 2 movies. Alien and Aliens were awesome, Peter replied. He was glad that Mina's selection for movie night won out via a raffle Momo had made since he was able to see their reactions. Hagakure, Kaminari and Zero clearly weren't into horror flicks as much as Ishido was. Wonder why it was 2 we saw. The redhead mused as he crossed his arms. I mean, I want to know what happens next. I heard there was a good 9 other movies in the Alien franchise and... You don't want to know. Peter cut him off, making his companion turn around. But Ripley and Newt and Hicks, they were on the ship and... You don't want to know, Peter said with a curt grin. Oh, moving on to more important things, hit me with the pairs and the DNA code. Kirishima's face fell. Oh come on Ace, you can't pull that on me. I just got the theorem stuff down. He whined. Our science test is Monday. Gotta be prepared. Peter patted him on the shoulder as the two got up to the main level and began to walk through UA's halls towards the locker rooms. They could hear the bustle upstairs of the juniors and seniors taking early exams. Oh, yeah Momo. Kirishima gawked in surprise as Momo was standing at the door of her locker room, and in her hero costume as well. Guess she was here for some training too. Here for some training. I am, and I see that Parker is teaching you on the basics of molecular sciences. I could have sworn I heard something about DNA down the hall. Momo mused. Why yeah, Peter said, gingerly scratching the back of his head. I was about to teach him about the DNA strands again. You know, elementary biology stuff. Elementary for you maybe. I'm still trying to memorize their names. The redhead wailed. Like, there's Adidas. Adenine. Peter corrected. Thymus. Thymine. Followed by Momo. Cytosis. Cytosine. Peter again. And guacamole. Guanine. Finished up the black-haired beauty, and Kirishima blushed, rubbing the back of his head. Relax dude. Peter patted him on the back. We're here to help. He turned to Momo. You going to Battle Center Beta? I am. Although, I was hoping to find someone from Class A here, and thankfully you two are the first ones I've met. If you can hang on for just a moment. Momo went back into the girls' locker room, and was back out in several moments with a foil-wrapped item in both hands. Oh, Peter blinked. Open it up, Momo exclaimed happily, beaming as she handed them over to Peter and Kirishima. The red-haired youth and the American complied and perked up. A rice ball, Peter asked, seeing a fried egg of sorts, or what could be a fried egg. Inside the seaweed wrap was something that was egg-shaped. It had the whites and the yellow yolk and everything. Yes, my family cook helped me make them. Peter and Kirishima looked back at each other. Hopefully her cooking skills weren't like her mom's, where she got a lot of help. The redhead seemed to have the same thought going through his head as well. The two of them took a bite and their eyes lit up. Momo-san, these are great. The girl blushed at the praise, looking to the side. Yeah, Kirishima exclaimed as he chomped away at it. Props to the cook. Thank you. I was nervous on how my first foray into cooking would turn out, but I'm glad you like it so much. Trust me. She laughed. I remember how bad my mother's cooking was. I hope this makes up for that gaffe. Peter and Kirishima as one gave a thumbs up. All's forgiven, Kirishima said with a full mouth as he finished scarfing it down. You're good. Peter swallowed before he spoke. Thanks for the breakfast. Well, we can go to the battle center together. Momo beamed. After I put away some of the onigiri. If I see the others, I'll be sure to hand them over today, as I know they will want to be here either to study or train. I can hit them up in the group text. Peter raised a hand. Tell him you got breakfast. And it's not shepherd's pie with. Momo winced, but nodded. Yes, with fried egg, vinegar, sardines and mahi. She then shook her head. Well, don't let me keep you waiting. Yeah, let's get dressed and on to training ace. Kirishima grinned as he walked into the locker room. Already sent the message. Karen spoke in Peter's ear as the brown-haired boy nodded before following his red-haired friend inside to get changed. Several years ago, Tenya had read an expression. When a man changed, familiar sights were subsequently seen through different eyes. He always appreciated it when it came to works of fiction. But it was another feeling entirely when he felt it in person. Never before had these hallowed halls felt as they did now. Even with no one in the hallways, all of the students confined to their homeroom classes for the morning, it felt different, more peaceful. And Tenya has always been one who was studious and preferred the rigid and familiar. The comfort of protocol. Tenya didn't know why, but he was thankful for the feeling of something different, as nebulous as it was. He arrived at Principal Nezu's door, the mousy principal's face carefully blank as Tenya entered. Thank you for having me on such short notice, sir, the blue-haired boy said, bowing deeply. Of course, Ida-kun. He paused. I trust you've reached your decision. Tenya felt something heavier settle in his chest. That feeling of doubt needling away at him as it had for the last few days. Except, with that doubt came a few memories. Yaoyorozu talking with him, the mouse before him giving him a second chance. On top of that, after things had cooled down, he had talked with his brother again. Things weren't perfect, and Tenya feared they never would be. But at the very least, they managed to talk. And because of that, the doubt still remained. No matter the feeling that he could get from Yaoyorozu, even stepping into this room still felt like an insult to someone else. Someone he didn't know, but knew that was more deserving. I am willing to try, Tenya said, his voice cautious. The tone alone made that feeling of guilt grow in his chest. Where was the conviction, the energy and the promise that came with the plus ultra saying? He didn't have it. He said exactly what he was thinking, but even that felt insignificant. Nezu nodded once. I see. That answer isn't exactly what I hoped to hear, but I am thankful to hear it nonetheless. Tenya nodded, and the principal leaned forward on his desk, a kind smile on his face. Give it time, Nezu said. The battle within will rage for some time, but I know that you've taken a step towards victory. Yes, sir, Tenya said. Now, the principal said, leaning back into his perky tone, I believe that you have an exam that you best get to. Yes, sir, Tenya repeated, bowing once more. Turning around, pushing open the principal's door felt easy, a relief given that the next obstacle would be much more daunting. His feet guided him through the halls till he stood in front of the doors of classroom 1A. He took a deep breath. Whatever he felt when he opened these doors, he would get through this test, and others like it. He could do that much. Pushing aside the doors, Tenya felt himself immediately become the center of attention. At his desk, Mr. Aizawa raised a single curious brow, even while the rest of his features screamed of annoyance. He wasn't the sight that stole the show for Tenya. Izuku and Ochako turned positively radiant upon seeing him again, and Yaoyorozu looked exceedingly happy as well. So he smiled, and it felt natural. The action was cut off when Aizawa-sensei cleared his throat. Ida, Aizawa said in a matter-of-fact tone, "You're late." "Forgive me, sensei. I needed to configure several matters with the principal." "That's nice," Aizawa said, waving his sentence off. "Your test is set up on your desk. You don't get extra time for being late, so get to it." He paused halfway through the motion of stepping into his sleeping bag. "That goes double for everyone else. You should be a quarter of the way done by this point." That statement got several curious eyes to slam back to their test. Though, Tenya did manage to catch Midoriya waving at him, and even Parker gave him a small nod as he crossed over to his desk. Yaoyorozu smiled, nodding as he got to his seat. His desk? No words could describe the feeling that overcame him when he saw that it was exactly the same as it once was. The only difference was a test set atop it, which would be a challenge to complete. But sitting down, with a pencil in his hand, the familiar motions of writing out the math equations and the scientific theories came back to him. He wrote and wrote, like everyone else around him, and eventually that guilt started to lessen. The next few days consisted of nothing but exams. For Peter, the math and science exams were a breeze, and he was able to leave early. He would have fine-tuned his suit with May, but she had her own exam in the support department. Peter fully believed that the mad inventor would pass, so long as she remembered that she had an exam in the first place. He spent his time largely studying with Karen and going over history in Japanese, and the subjects made Peter grind his teeth. Karen had no problem iterating history lessons and synopses she could find on the web, but it was up to Peter to retain them. He was never really a history buff, but to learn centuries of history that he still hadn't even reached the tip of was aggravating, as well as the intricacies of katakana, hiragana and kanji in Japanese. You helped, giving a fresh perspective, but he had to stay for the entirety of the exam period to complete them both. English was simple. It was his native tongue and he had no issue with it. Of course, Karen herself would not help Peter on any of the exams, citing an academic safeguard installed in her system so that the wall crawler wouldn't have an AI cheating for him. Before long it was Thursday, and Peter was leaving the locker room dressed in his SpiderMan suit. "Web cartridges set?" he asked. "All clear." The displays of his web ammunition were at full. "All systems green. Vitals good." Peter grinned as he walked out, seeing the other students walking on ahead. "On the bus," Aizawa said while leading his students out of the hallway, and before them was a bus. "We're going to the testing center now." Peter nodded as all of his fellow classmates lined up. "Man, why can't they post the grades yet? The suspense is killing me," Ishido whined as they began to get on the bus. "Don't you feel confident that you passed?" Kirishima asked. He flexed, grinning. "I feel great. I gave it my all." "I know I did too. I learned a lot under Momo and Parker, but I wanna know a SAP so I can get on with it and think of the camp," Ishido implored. "If I were you," Aizawa mentioned, "I'd focus more on the practical exam than your written exams right now. Move along." The black-haired man mused as the pinkette perked up. "I'm sure you did great, Ishido," Peter called out as they got on the bus and he took his seat by the window. "Keep your head up." The girl dressed in the tie-dye purple and green outfit turned his way and nodded. "Thanks, Parker. I learned a lot under you and Momo over the last week. You two are natural teachers." Peter blushed under his mask. "Well, I just imparted on you what I know is all," he said, looking to the side, feeling someone sit beside him. "Had some good teachers in my life, and help from yours truly," Karen whispered, taking in some pride. "Of course, you too," Peter whispered. "Who are you talking to?" came a voice and the young hero turned, finding Izuku right next to him with a curious glance. "Did he just hear Karen?" Come again?" Peter asked, his eyes a little wider than usual. "I could have sworn I heard a feminine voice speak in English, and you just did so too," Izuku mentioned as he sat with his hands in his lap. "He did." Pripes. The other students were filing in, game faces on many as they were ready for the practical final. "Ayu," Peter stammered. Just talking to myself," he said in Japanese. "I mean, I'm sure Ishido had some good teachers too." I made no sense right there. "Fudge," he thought to himself. Words appeared over Peter's HUD. "I'll be quiet for now." Izuku titled his head. "If you say so," the green-haired boy replied. Soon the last student filed in, as Peter could see Momo sitting beside Jiro up front and Aizawa took his place by the driver's seat. The automated bus started up and they were on the road, most of the class sitting in silence outside of a few whispers. Peter leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes. "I wonder what the practical will be. Has to be hero stuff if we're in our costumes," he mused to himself. He then heard muttering beside him as he opened an eye, seeing Izuku whisper to himself and using a finger to write on his glove palm. "Will our exam be fighting the teachers, or battling ourselves? Or will there be additional robots? The possibility of bringing an alumni from UA. 2 is not off the table, so what would Aizawa be planning? Izuku wondered to himself as Peter let off a small chuckle. Could be anything. Just got to keep an open mind, Midori. Peter spoke, earning Izuku's gaze. Oh, well, that is true, but I'm trying to wonder what we may face. Anything from robot villains to fighting teachers or even ourselves and whatnot. Best thing we can do is just deal with it. Peter shrugged. Yeah, guess we're gonna have to think this up on the fly. Izuku uttered to himself. Oh, there's the entrance to the battle center. Whispers were more hushed as the bus came to a stop. Or here, Aizawa stated. Alright everyone, first rows out front, single file. Let's do this quick, Momo said as she stood up, taking on her role as class representative well. Each student left the bus one by one before they were deposited before the entrance gate into Battle Center Beta. Before them stood the teachers who had taught them throughout the year. Aizawa walked over to join the row of Snipe, Cementos, Midnight, 13, Ectoplasm, Power Loader and Present Mike. Above them was a giant electronic billboard of sorts as well with UA's logo on it. Now then, your practical exam will begin shortly, Aizawa declared as Class 1 stood at attention. The grading criteria of this exam will be different from most, with a pass or fail requirement. And, if some of you did your homework, I bet you asked your upperclassmen on what past final exams had entailed, right? Didn't think of that. Peter shrugged. It's gonna be a robot rumble, like facing an army of 0-pointers, Kaminari declared confidently. A free-for-all fight to the finish, Sato inquired. Not quite, my dear students. A voice spoke out, and from behind Cementos was Principal Nezu. You see, Aizawa here has decided to change the exams from past years. In other words, something completely different. A groaning sound came from the electric user. So much for getting his hopes up. I must say, Eraserhead, Class 1 I hear has been forcing you to be quite creative, haven't they? You were the one who made the War of the Flags event for the festival after all. The Mousebear said as he looked up to the shaggy-haired man who gave the slightest of shrugs. Aizawa turned his attention onto the students. Due to the growth you all have had here in UA, and at your internships, combined with the external factors, I felt it appropriate to change the exam's formatting in this case. He tapped his watch, and the billboard flashed, displaying 3 lines with text in them. Hostage Crisis, Villain Chase, Disaster Crisis. Our practical today will be 3 separate simulations, all of which will be emulating events you all will encounter in your careers as pros. Aizawa stated as the class buzzed with questions. Hostages, Disaster, Zero said aloud. Bring on the villains. I can take M, Hiroshima declared. Of course, the teachers you see before you will be taking part in this simulation, some of whom will be playing certain roles. They may aid you, or may fight against you, or something else entirely different. Aizawa then smirked. Plus, let's say that we have a little surprise or a dozen in each scenario. Hang on, Izuku spoke aloud. People taking part in a hostage situation and a disaster. Not robots. Who will they be? Uraraka asked, while Aizawa let off a soft, almost sadistic chuckle. That's for me to know and you to find out. Now, I myself won't be taking part in each exam, as I will be on the ground with you being your proctor. How you pass will be up to me. If you meet my standards and go beyond, and fulfill the objectives of each simulation, you'll pass. If not, you'll fail. I trust I don't need to elaborate further. No questions, save for a raised hand from Bakugo. We have 20 people in our class. The blonde bomber spoke out as Peter didn't look his way. And 3 simulations. I take it we aren't going to be dividing this up evenly. Correctamundo. For each simulation you'll be part of a team. Present Mike spoke out. As for which team, well, they've already been decided by us. He raised a hand. Now let's see those teams. And, snap. Peter coughed, looking away as he grit his teeth under his mask, his body tightening up. Here are your teams and teachers, Present Mike declared as the names were now on display besides the exam criteria. Hostage Crisis, Bakugo Katsuki, Todoroki Shoto, Kaminari Denki, Asui Tsuyu, Hagakure Toru, Sato Rikido, Koji Koda. Teachers, Cementos, Midnight and Present Mike. Villain Chase, Peter Parker, Zero Hanta, Ashido Mina, Shoji Mizo, Uraraka Ochako, Kirishima Ijiru. Teachers, Snipe, Ectoplasm, and Nezu. Disaster Crisis, Midoriya Izuku, Yaoyorozu Momo, Jiru Kyoka, Aoyama Yuga, Mashirawa Jiro, Takoyami Fumikage, Ida Tenya. Teachers, All Might, 13, and Power Loader. As you can see, Battle Center Beta is our main test center for the first 2 simulations, with the USJ, Aizawa stated, hosting the last exam. As stated earlier, the teachers will be playing certain roles within the simulation. What they entail will not be revealed until the exam begins. Chasing after a bad guy, should be easy, although the teachers involved would be Snipe, Ectoplasm, and Principal Nezu himself. Snipe supposedly could shoot any projectile and never miss, while Ectoplasm could make clones. Nezu was, according to his profile page, the smartest creature in the world. Hostage team, make your way into the battle center's main square. I'll be joining you shortly, Aizawa ordered. Teachers, get to your positions and notify our volunteers helping us in this exam. He said, rest of Class A, go to the same room you watched the battle trials in when you first arrived. You'll find Recovery Girl there. Roger that. Mike saluted, grinning. Cementos took a deep breath. I hope I am up for this. I'll give it my all to ensure your students get the best experience possible. Nervous, Midnight smirked as she looked up at the cement man. Peter didn't hear them as they made small talk going on ahead. Bakugo, Todoroki and the others went on ahead as well. Good luck, Asui, Izuku called out. Thanks, and call me Tsu, the frog girl replied as she hopped along with Hagakure and Koji. Okay, feeling better now. Peter-san, the group, Momo said, and Peter perked up, seeing the rest of the class going on ahead. She and Izuku were close by. Oh yeah, spaced out. He shook his head. Sorry. Shoto walked with the group as they followed the arrows leading deeper into Battle Center Beta, his peers talking amongst themselves. So we get to save hostages, huh? Sounds exciting. Hagakure chirped as the floating pair of gloves spoke with Asui. Knowing the teachers, I bet they're gonna have to come up with some way for us to think super hard. Kaminari complained, walking beside Sato. Let's not focus on thinking super hard for a while. My head is still hurting after all those exams. Penny for your thoughts, Todoroki. Got any ideas on what kind of situation we will be placed in to save hostages? Hagakure asked, the dual-haired boy feeling her eyes on him. Yeah, you're pretty smart and have a big know-how on hero stuff considering your family. What do you think? Kaminari inquired. Shoto was quiet, his brain searching for an answer. At this point, a hostage situation can be anything from a stick-up to a heist. So it's best not to dwell on that, and he remembered that the teachers themselves would be taking part as well. That's right, they may be foes in this exam. Focus on who might be the villains. He noticed Bakugo look back at him from the front. Good point. If it's Midnight, we're in serious trouble, considering her quirk, Sato said. Can't she knock anyone out with her pink mist stuff? And worse yet, it has a more immediate effect on boys. And they're the majority here, no offense. Asui added. None taken, Shoto replied. Present Mike's quirk is called Voice, which allows him to raise his vocal pitch to high levels. That means if we face him in a frontal assault, we'll get caught up in his sound waves. Ribbit. I remember going to a concert once with my dad when I was young. Asui grimaced as she rubbed her ears. He took us to the front row and the rock band was so loud. Mike will make that sound like a whisper. Better be ready to lose your eardrums. Bakugo spoke unsympathetically. Aizawa said that Recovery Girl is nearby, so breaking some bones may be par for the course here. Yeah, don't giant stereos fire out the audio in a cone or something. Oh, I wish Jiru was here, Hagakure added. She would be able to counter Mike with her own earphone jack. Kaminari had his hands behind his head. Knowing Aizawa, he probably had that in mind, didn't you teach? He turned his head, seeing Aizawa follow behind and not even giving a word. Why so serious? He uttered, rolling his eyes as he focused back in front. That means our best bet is Cementos. Sato smashed his fist into his hand. With my sugar rush, I can take out his stone walls. That's right, Hagakure chimed in. And Bakugo, with your explosions combined with Todoroki's fire and ice, we can handle Semen. Don't be stupid. Bakugo cut off the invisible girl as he looked back, his ruby red eyes glaring. Knowing Aizawa back there, Shoto turned, seeing Aizawa follow the group in silence. Regardless of any teacher he throws at us, he's going to counter each and every one of us. And I'm guessing it's right up there. Bakugo rounded the corner as Shoto followed, and true enough, down the street within the battle center was a collection of people, mostly Ectoplasm clones with big blue vests over their trench coats. Police uniforms. Hey, we have some Ectoplasm clones to help, Kaminari said gleefully before his face fell. Who's that guy? He asked, noting a man walking through the crowd of clones. He was in a beige trench coat of sorts. Yes, I asked the police station to supply me with some help for this exam. The police chief there was kind enough to assist me himself this morning for this specific exercise. Aizawa spoke up as he was just behind the group. The group of people were in front of what seemed to be a bank, which proved that this would indeed be a heist-turned-hostage crisis. Thankfully, this will be just under an hour of my time, said the average-looking man as he finished Aizawa's thoughts. These the students? He asked, eyes looking over the students before he coughed. Pardon me, heroes. In training. Aizawa finished for him. And yes, now, students, he ordered, and everyone turned around. Here is your prompt for this exam. As you can see, this bank has been seized by villains, with hostages inside. He stood with his hands in his pockets as his red eyes looked over each of the students. Your mission is simple: find a way to save all of the hostages and neutralize the villains. Depending on how you fulfill this objective will result in passing or failing this exam. Some of you have taken part in situations where civilians were in danger. Shoto shifted uncomfortably. And all of you have confronted villains during your time here at UA. For better or for worse, use what you know, share with your comrades, and adapt on the fly. You cannot ask me for advice, I will simply ignore you. However, he gestured. Police Chief Fukuda Botan here will be happy to assist you. Indeed, Fukuda spoke with a confident grin. We're happy to see you all have arrived on the scene, heroes. We have a situation, and suddenly there was an outburst of loud, boisterous laughter that interrupted him, and the students turned towards the electronic billboard above the bank as it frizzled in and out. Shoto's heart tightened. Wait, it sounded similar. Could it be All Might? FOOLS, came a voice as the screen flickered to life, and there on the screen was Cementos wearing Groucho glasses and a top hat. I see that you have come to thwart me and my minions' plans. Not today, for I. Kaminari burst out laughing while Hagakure stifled laughter, the rest of the students gaping at the ridiculous disguise Cementos had donned. He just put that on and that's it. Kaminari bent over in raucous laughter. Chief Fukuda gave their teacher a sideways glance that made Aizawa roll his eyes. Wait, what was my line again? He looked to the side. Oh, that. He coughed into his hands. For I, Rockmaster, will escape this vault with all of its riches. So it's Cementos, huh? Bring it on. Sato pulled out his sugar shaker, thumb ready to remove the top. OHHH. Heroes have come. Drat. Curses. But we have the upper hand. The camera panned over, and there on the floor against the bank counter was Present Mike in casual attire, Midnight in a scandalous-looking business formal outfit, which zoomed away, blurring. More people. No, go pan over them all. Slowly, Cementos' voice said, but her attire is so. I can't bear to watch. Came a meek voice over the other end. It was male of sorts, young too, but not one who Shoto recognized. Who is that? Bakugo growled, eyes narrowed as Shoto stepped up. A surprise Aizawa placed in there, no doubt. He deduced, which meant an unknown enemy with an unknown quirk. Still, Cementos looks so stupid pff. Kaminari added as he pointed at the concerned stone man. Shoto heard a snort and turned, seeing the police chief stifling laughter. Aizawa saw Fukuda smirking up a storm. You're not helping. Sorry, you should have picked better eraser. He smiled with a shrug, causing the black-haired man to sigh hard through his nose as he pinched the bridge of it. Oh, I needed this break. Thanks, you're not welcome. The camera's focus returned to a snickering Midnight, who perked and then slumped, groaning and was writhing very eagerly, the moans coming from her. Oh geez, Sato added, pink on his cheeks. Oh yes, Kaminari giggled with a grin. Pervs, Hagakure huffed. I think I hear Takoyami screaming. Asui added, you do. I don't. Kaminari was cut off as the sound of an indignant roar came through. It was light and muted, but it was there. Yeah, I hear it. What the hell? Bakugo yelled out, gaining everyone's attention as the camera panned over and in the observation room, Peter Parker felt something. Spider senses ting. Is that my mom? Dia. The screams of pure horror made his ears ring, and he was certain some inner ear function had ruptured or something, because holy hell, the pair of lungs on his classmates could have been a quirk in and of itself. He leaned away, turning one eye towards Jiru and Midoriya, who were both staring at the screen with open-mouthed horror. There was a short, plump woman with green hair. Midoriya. Bakugo gawked. Midoriya. Wait, that's Midoriya's mother. There was another man too, one with shaggy blonde hair and punk rock clothing. Whoa, that's Jiru's dad. Kaminari's humor was gone, pointing at the screen in shock. Yeah, the punk clothing did look familiar. Hey Aizawa. Bakugo turned, eyes wide with anger. What's the big idea? We needed some volunteers. Aizawa replied before he smirked. I figured that in order to make this more of an intimate experience, I sent out a little survey to your parents' emails or gave them phone calls asking if they wanted to take part in helping their children become heroes. I say over half of them obliged. He put his hands in his pockets. I trust you'll be taking this far more seriously. He turned, and the dual-haired boy saw Hagakure and Kaminari shiver under his glare. All right, Hagakure stuttered. Kaminari patted his cheeks and shook his head. Cementos coughed with an ahem. As you can see, I have hostages that I will not hesitate to kill unless my demands are met, heroes. Let me demonstrate to you how serious I am. Kaiju. And suddenly, tentacles lurched out, attacking the Ectoplasm clone while eliciting a fascinated look from Midoriya's mother. The tentacles looked like they belonged to a squid as they constricted him. Then they tightened, and the clone dissolved into wisps of smoke, clearly dead. Now, Rockmaster yelled as he knelt down, pressing his hands against the ground as stone spears surrounded the hostages. Midoriya's mother jumped a little in surprise, but Shoto could just make out Midnight's hand holding her own for a moment. If my demands are not met within 30 minutes time, I will kill all of the hostages here. If you so dare try to attack me and my powerful minion kaiju, I will kill them all. I have the upper hand here, heroes, you do not. BWHAHAHAHAHA Cementos broke off in a coughing fit after. Oof, my throat. I am not good at yelly-o. 30 minutes, or ELSEE. Now then, Aizawa cut in, and the students turned towards him. Your objective, save the remaining hostages and defeat the villains, without causing any harm to the hostages or major collateral damage to the bank. You have your time limit. Your final exam begins now. He stepped back, hands in his pockets as the heroes in training turned towards the bank while the police officers took cover behind their cars, hands on guns as they pointed at the villains. Crap, he said if we go in right away he'd kill them. Kaminari uttered. So much for me trying to paralyze them too, they're too close to the hostages. You had a plan? Bakugo asked. Well, yeah, it was forming in my head before cement I mean. Rockmaster made his demands. Asui, remember the USJ. How can I not, Ribbit? Well, I was about to suggest you throw me at the bank full throttle, then I use my quirk to stun them like we did with the villains at the shipwreck zone. Kaminari sighed. But that's out the window. That plan is fucking stupid. Bakugo growled. It woulda worked. Maybe to give you more brain damage. Speaking of kaiju, did he have some kind of octopus quirk or something? Hagakure chirped up. Koda nodded. He must be some kind of pro hero here to help. And we don't have the time to bitch and moan. Bakugo cut him off, stepping up as he glared at the group, even rounding on him. We got 30 minutes, so let's focus on passing this shit. Anyone got any ideas? Kaminari asked, looking around. Koda shook his head before turning towards Sato. I have one. Shoto spoke out before the muscular boy could answer. The young man turned towards Fukuda, who was standing a distance away and watching with intrigue. Chief, we need your help. The man perked up, his smile dropping as he got serious, obviously getting into character. What do you need, heroes? We need a map of the bank and the buildings surrounding it. Shoto pointed all around the area, pointing at the skyscrapers around the bank office. We have to know the layout of the place, particularly any backdoors. He turned towards Asui and Hagakure, which we can use to sneak in. Hagakure said, gloves clenched as she seemed to bounce on the balls of her feet. I had a feeling you'd say that the moment you said map, Ribbit. Asui nodded. So me and Hagakure gotta sneak in behind the villains using the layout of the building. But we need to distract them. They may be focused on us, but they will have eyes in the back of their heads, assuming they know the bank has any emergency exits or vents. Bakugo added as he stepped up. Hey, Chief. Got a loudspeaker? He growled, looking up at him. And how come there's no yellow tape? He turned his head around, looking down and then up the street past the array of cars and Ectoplasm clones. We don't have enough men to form a perimeter too. Fukuda uttered. My men are spread thin as it is. My gosh, Toruheim Chalayan. Beside what seemed to be some random adults was a floating business suit and a pair of sunglasses. Do your best. He waved with his own pair of gloves. Shoto watched as the invisible girl promptly covered what was presumably her face. Oh my god, duh. I'd go a while, she whined. Civilians, here, Kaminari squawked. I mean, civilians usually gather when something is going down right. Sato mused. Koda nodded in agreement. Shoto bit his lip. Of course there would be civilians wanting to see an exchange between heroes and villains. Now's not the time, dumbass. Bakugo hissed, and the group focused back on him. Ignore the parents, right now we have a mission to do. Icy hot. Shoto turned towards the blonde as his heterochromatic eyes met Bakugo's intense red ones. Make an ice wall around the area. Make a perimeter and don't cause too much damage. On it, Shoto nodded as he turned towards the other boys. Kaminari, Sato. Negotiate. Learn what our villains want, install them. Talk to them. The blonde boy perked up, looking nervous. Wait, you want us to negotiate? Hey Chief Fukuda, don't you have a negotiator around here? The officer shrugged. He's caught in rush hour traffic, I'm afraid, he said, looking at his phone. Shoto turned, seeing Aizawa still leaning against the wall. Hands in pockets, eyes evaluating them all like a hawk. This was still an exam, yet this exam was designed to emulate a true situation they might have to face as heroes someday. An Ectoplasm cop clone arrived with several papers that contained blueprints, handing them to the grenade gauntlet-wearing hero. Bakugo knelt down and began to spread out the prints, seeing the layout of the 3 buildings. The 2 skyscrapers sandwiching the bank, and the bank itself. "Hey you, dinosaur." Koji jumped at being called on. "What's your name?" Bakugo demanded. "You don't know his name?" Kaminari asked. "Never bothered to remember." "Okay, here's a little bit of the old Bakugo we know." Hagakure muttered. "Was getting a little worried there." "Preach," Kaminari added. "Shut it, dumbasses." Bakugo snarled through grit teeth before turning his attention to Koji. The tall, stocky, lizard-looking boy looked nervous before he made hand gestures. "Okay, don't talk then, dinosaur." Bakugo growled as Shoto trotted away and conjured up his ice surge, sliding in front of the citizens. He ran from the back as Bakugo, Kaminari and Asui were talking and pointing at the blueprint map. He made another barricade of ice and turned back, returning to the group. "Have a plan?" he asked. Bakugo turned back, and without a word he gave a dangerous-looking affirmative smirk. "So, is no one going to say it?" Peter asked. The rest of his class gave him a sideways glance. Well, other than Midoriya and Jiru, the 2 of them hadn't so much as blinked since they saw their parents. They could have been chiseled out of stone. "Say what, Ace?" Hiroshima asked, hands behind his head as he looked back at the red and blue-suited wall crawler. "Well, we got the classic villain setup. The over-the-top villain, the ticking clock, the race to save the people," Peter said, adding a flourish with a finger wiggle. "I'm just wondering where the theme music is." Shoji's forearm eyes blinked at the American's suggestion. "Are we supposed to have a theme song in these situations?" the multi-armed boy asked. "Like some Sentai theme?" Uraraka asked. "Yes," Peter exclaimed, a believer in these heathen lands. He had at least studied up on the fact that Power Rangers did indeed come from Japan, and it was called Sentai too, an entire genre of Sentai. "You're very enthused about the prospect," Parker-san, Momo commented. He shrugged. "I'm kinda not. I'm just trying to see how loud I can get before Jiru and Midoriya snap out of it." As the rest of the class looked at the 2 in question, one of them was pinker than the highlights on her face. While Midoriya had been mumbling something under his breath since they got in the audience booth, he was even palm writing. "Is it bad that I kinda want to see how long he can go for?" Ashido asked with a half smirk. "Yes," Momo sighed. Shouta kept a close eye on each of his students. His dry eye itched like crazy, but he ignored it as best he could. Blinking helped temporarily, and he was running low on eye drops already. These were the tests that largely allowed students to pass in UA, their actions on said field that spoke about their quality as heroes. If accountants could be heroes, then mathematicians would be the greatest defense the world had ever seen. So it was the basic plan coming to fruition before him that made Shouta mark a few things on his mental board. It wasn't the best plan, but having one that utilized everyone in the team to at least give some measure of support to the overall mission was something to be commended. Such as Step 1, distracting the villains with 2 of the largest targets in the group. Kaminari and Sato practically walked up the steps to the front door of the bank with a megaphone in hand. Neither was the most dangerous, that title going to Todoroki and Bakugo, but their bright colors and loud, seemingly simple personalities made for good negotiators. "Hey, Rockmaster," Kaminari shouted into the microphone. "Yes?" he asked, only to cough. "This voice is rather taxing." What is it?" "Have you come to kneel to my demands?" "Pretty much, yeah," Kaminari said, Sato nodding next to him. "Huh? I never told you my demands." "Well, you can have M." Kaminari waved it off. "I mean, you want the money, right? I mean, bank is right behind ya." "Maybe so, but I want more, you fool." "Oh yeah, I never gave them my demands." "How silly of me." Rockmaster coughed. "I want 1 billion yen in cash at the door, and a helicopter for me and Kaiju to esque." Another coughing fit broke out. "Goodness gracious. Phew. To escape in. Well, that can be arranged. As long as the hostages aren't hurt, you're getting a chopper," Kaminari said with a smile and thumbs up. "You getting all that, Chief?" Sato yelled as he looked back at the crowd of Ectoplasm clones and Fukuda, who nodded as he had a phone out. "Way ahead of you," the chief said, smirking up a storm. Shouta blinked reflexively at the sight before him. He had no words. Apparently, neither did Cementos, his sidekick, or the hostages. A quick check of his phone and the cameras inside of the bank showed most of the occupants sharing a single confused look with one another. Midnight seemed to be whispering something into Inko's ear as well. Whether it was assurance or explaining what was happening, he didn't know. "You want the riches, you can have them," Kaminari said, his helper Sato continuing to nod along. "Okay," Rockmaster said in a confused tone. "Just give it a bit and we'll have the whole block's vault numbers ready and yours, so long as you keep the hostages safe," Kaminari yelled into the loudspeaker. Shouta's attention snapped to Fukuda, who simply shrugged when the dry-eyed man leveled his gaze upon him. Yeah, obviously this was total bullshit. No chief had the authority to give that kind of information out, no matter the number of hostages involved. How about everyone else? They still had positions to fill in this test. At the edge of the circle, Todoroki was building ice barricades to keep the civilians out of the way while things progressed, along with making them higher to prevent escape should Rockmaster and Kaiju aim to get out from the front. Bakugo was around too, shouting out obscenities that would have no sane person approaching this street. For the villains, the duo would be the biggest threats if anything went wrong for them. Yet there they were, standing around at the edge, Bakugo from the right, Todoroki from the left, far enough away to make it seem like they weren't involved, but close enough for either of them to launch a ranged attack on anyone or anything that got out of the bank. Not the best plan, but a workable one if nothing else. Moving on from there, Koji was standing around aimlessly, apparently like they hadn't found a good method for him to use his quirk. Short-sighted. That left only Hagakure and Asui. A quick look around gave him a small green blur that landed on the roof of the bank. At the same time, there was an opening in the side that wasn't there before, and Shouta hadn't seen anyone do anything even remotely close to that end of the building. The only problem was that they were on a timer, and with the distraction team in front, they'd put themselves on an even smaller clock. As soon as the distraction started to fail, the hostages would be in even more danger. Dun 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 dun. Hagakure sang a spy tune to herself as she snuck into the building. Todoroki was kind enough to make a tunnel within the ice wall for her to sneak out while abandoning her gloves and shoes. It was super cold being out in the buff, but she made do. After all, she was used to it. The invisible girl went up the stairs leading into the skyscraper next door to the bank and remembered the route in her head. Up into the building. She opened the door and slunk on through, running across the silent hallway of what looked like a financial corporate building's lobby. Go to the back behind the desk. She jogged, her feet making soft slaps along the marble tile floor as she went behind the desk and into the employees section. Find the back door through the break room. She ran through the area once again, going through the door, but doing so carefully as she peeked her head out. No traps in the break room. Head out the door and into the side exit from the bank. She was not out in the open in a tight alleyway. She could see the ice from Todoroki's barrier at the other end, covering for her as she saw the door leading into the bank. Okay, Toru hyped herself up as she trotted over and opened the door by a crack, peeking inside. No sound, but she took a thorough look around, seeing a tripwire with soda cans from a busted-up vending machine at the entrance to the door. She stepped over it. She tiptoed through the side room down the carpet hallway, happy to no longer hear her footsteps as she kept an eye on the ground. As she passed by an open door, she peeked her head through and noticed a bunch of lasers at ground level. There were several of them, so even if she spread her legs out she'd get caught and trigger an alarm. Only choice was to do a long jump over it. She backed away and took a deep breath to calm her racing heart. If she screwed this up, Rockmaster would kill the hostages, and the exam would be over via failure. Physical actions may not be her speciality, but time to go plus ultra. She whispered to hype herself up as she broke out into a sprint, jumping over the lasers and landing on the other side as quietly as she could by planting with the ball of her foot and rolling her weight onto her heel. The thump of her landing was loud in her ears, but after a moment she heard nothing and breathed a sigh of relief. Yes, she whispered under her breath. All that physical training she took with Shoji was paying off. She trotted silently down the hall, noticing no doors or obvious traps as she got to the door, and looked through the window. Kaiju was only a few feet away in his white cape as Cementos responded to the distraction out front. If she opened the door, Kaiju would hear her. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Asui peeking in from the glass roof, looking in her general direction. Since Kaiju wasn't looking at the door, Toru raised her finger and used the sun's rays. She signaled her with 2 faint light blinks. Asui nodded. It was time to move. All she had to do was wait for Kaiju to be distracted and for Bakugo to make his move. Come on guys, let's do this. What is the delay? Rockmaster screamed. Hey, you think getting safe numbers is like ordering takeout? Sparky screamed back. They've got to go through protocols and stuff. Sparky's confident smirk died a little, and there was silence on the field. Bakugo gritted his teeth. Idiot. Stuff? What kind of fool do you take me for? There was no sound, no shift before a wave of concrete erupted out of the ground. Sugar threw a cube of sugar into his mouth as he threw Sparky clear of the wave. With a single punch, the first wave of concrete was smashed into nothing. But it was only the first. Suddenly, half a dozen waves crashed into the yellow boy. Sato was knocked back, but in his stupid state, the idiot didn't feel the pain that he should have when it came to half a ton of stone hitting him like a truck. Bakugo aimed his gauntlets and fired off a few blasts. The explosions turned that concrete into fucking dust, but the waves kept coming. He needed to up the ant weight. Shit, Icy Hot was going in. The monochrome boy slid in and unleashed a wall of ice to slow down the surge. A temporary solution, but one that let Bakugo get a sweat going. He roared, unleashing a flurry of explosions that landed on the wall of cement like a carpet bombing. The initial wave was reduced to nothing, but unlike Katsuki, Rockmaster seemed utterly incapable of slowing down his assault. "We need to get to him. They're gonna get the hostages," Sparky yelled. Bakugo smirked as he took flight, loud blasts emitting from his palms. He rose up, and in those precious few seconds he got a lay of the land, even seeing the windows of the bank. Rockmaster was up front, hands to the floor as the cement oozed under his control. Behind him, Kaiju stood in his white cape and black and white tunic. All eyes were on him. He noticed the door leading behind the bank being open. He lifted his gauntlets up and charged, but not too fast as he stopped and aimed his hands, cupping them together. Rockmaster looked up in surprise. Katsuki noticed the hostages behind them looking at him in awe. Midnight turned away and covered Midoriya's eyes, as did Present Mike and his fellow hostage. "Stun grenade," Bakugo yelled, and bright light emitted from his palms. Rockmaster was caught in the flash, yelling in surprise as he stood up in shock. "Kaiju, kill them." Bakugo noticed Kaiju turn around and saw his hands morph into giant lobster claws. He smirked. Light refraction. Bakugo turned away, and the light that Bakugo gave Invisigirl was absorbed and redoubled back onto Kaiju and a recovering Cementos, blinding them further as it seared their eyes. "Gah, my eyes," Rockmaster yelled in agony, hands covering them as he staggered. And leaping down with her long tongue as she broke through the glass roof, Frog swooped straight for Kaiju. With a powerful kick, she knocked him down. As Katsuki fell to the ground, he saw her burst through the window arms first to cover her head. "Come on," she yelled, waving her glass-riddled arm. She was covered in shards as all the hostages began running. Midoriya being led by Midnight hand in hand, followed by the other dude and Present Mike. "GNH, they're getting away," Kaiju yelled. "No you," Invisigirl declared as she let out another burst of light in his direction, and Kaiju grunted as he swung. Invisigirl yelped as Frog's tongue grabbed Invisigirl and got her out of the way as the giant claw crashed into the desk. He sprouted more octopi tentacles as he fired out randomly due to his blindness. Invisigirl was pulled away as Frog hopped away with her. Even Cementos was struck by the tentacles. "Ouch, sorry sensei. It's boss, and it's okay. Yeah, I'm useless. Sorry boss." Had to give her credit. She came through even as she landed over by the police cars. The villains were flummoxed. Time to take them down. Rockmaster turned, glare on his disguise-laden face. "Inawug," Rockmaster yelled, slamming his fist into the ground as cement spikes roared outside the bank towards him and the cars, only for a glacier of ice to appear, blocking the flow as Katsuki saw Icy Hot off to the side slam his hand to the ground and flash freeze it in ice, only for more tentacles courtesy of Kaiju to smash into the ice, shattering it and freeing Rockmaster and Kaiju. "I'll destroy this whole city if I have to," Rockmaster declared as Bakugo landed on the ground, Icy Hot beside him as he heard yelling. He noticed Sugar run up too, the idiot popping several sugar cubes into his mouth. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see was Sparky tending to the hostages and to Froggy. Her arms were riddled with cuts before Katsuki focused back on the villains. The first wave of stone rushed towards them, and Sugar roared as he let out a flurry of punches, destroying them without pause as he kept charging. Icy Hot sliding in around him as Katsuki flew by. Kaiju's tentacle snapped to the ready, only to get slapped aside as a bird ran straight into his face. "A bird?" Kaiju asked, slightly confused. Suddenly, there was a flock of them, little black birds, pigeons and others squawking, chirping and flapping their wings in Kaiju and Rockmaster's faces. Now, Katsuki charged, Icy Hot sliding alongside him as Sugar charged up. "You're behind," Katsuki roared, blasting forth and rushing Kaiju. "Wag!" Sato yelled like a berserker as they broke through the door. Kaiju was surprised for all of a heartbeat before a tentacle lashed out. Katsuki pivoted in midair with a blast, catching a surprised Kaiju off guard as he tackled him with a gauntlet bash to the head. He got on top, palms to his opponent's face. He heard Cementos grunt as his first wave was stopped by Sugar, with Icy Hot taking a stance between the subdued villains, ice and fire on his arms as he was ready to attack. "You're under arrest," Icy Hot declared coldly. Rockmaster winced, but growled with gritted teeth. "Don't try anything stupid, or I'll blast your face off." Katsuki grinned, palm warm as Kaiju winced. Looking at him he did look young. About several years older in fact, with his youthful face and narrow eyes. There was a pinging sound that echoed over the entire battle center. "The exam is over," said an automated female voice as everyone perked up. Finally, said a voice as Katsuki turned, seeing Cementos sigh while his voice was hoarse. Gone was the glare, and in its place was a warm and pleased smile. Well done, students. Although, Sato, can you stop hugging me please? He asked before coughing. Ugh, I need water stat. And air. Oh, sorry. Sugar slurred before he let go of the stone man and rose up. He offered a hand which the stone man graciously accepted. You can get off now, said a voice as Katsuki looked down, and the nervous man's eyes narrowed, and he felt shivers down his spine. Looking down, the boy had a hand pointed at Katsuki's chest. Did this guy let him win? TCH, fine. Whatever. Katsuki looked away as he got off of his opponent. The boy casually got up, dusting off his suit, as if the entire situation was just another day on the job. Who was this guy? All right then, said a voice over the loudspeaker. Bakugo, Todoroki, Koda, Sato, Hagakure, come on down. You're going to get your grade. Aizawa stated as Katsuki stood up. Excellent work I say kids. Cementos stated as he rose up, brushing himself off. A job well done. Dinosaur perked up and seemed to mutter under his breath. Great distraction, Koda. Icy Hot said as the two walked down the steps. Kaiju put his hood over his head as he and Cementos followed them. Great job acting like villains you guys. Mike yelled as he stood with the clones and the other civilians. Gotta say Ishiyama, you make for a fun villain. A bit too hammy I imagine. Midnight said with her hand on her hip. But, you were taking inspiration from All Might weren't you? Cementos laughed and rubbed the back of his head. I only thought of what kind of villain All Might, heavens forbid, would be. And considering his loud nature and bravado, I hope I did my best to give these fine students a taste of what they may face down the road in their hero car. Cementos broke out into a coughing fit. Uaf, Anamajiki, splendid job of being my minion. I knew I made the right pick in choosing you, he said with a smile, patting him on the back like a proud papa, as expected of my honor student when you were a freshman. All this praise. I don't deserve it. I mean I messed up and stuff, Amajiki said, uttering weakly, trying to lower the hood even further. You did a great job being villains. Well, we weren't at all roughed around, so maybe a bad one. I'm not sure, but thank you for teaching the next generation of heroes. Midoriya and Co added as Bakugo walked past. The green-haired woman noticed him, and her frown was evident. Katsuki didn't look her way as he walked past, seeing Aizawa standing by with Fukuda and Frog being supported by Sparky with a splint on her leg, to say nothing of the bandages on her arms too. He saw Midoriya leave with Midnight, the two of them talking and the teacher laughing it up. Seemed like she had fun in some manner. What's with you? Katsuki asked inquisitively. I get the arms but your ankle. Landed awkwardly, no biggie. Ribbit. Oh, she winced. Nothing a visit with recovery girl can't fix though. Thanks for offering the first aid chief. Sparky gave the police chief a thumbs up. Anytime heroes, Fukuda said with a smile. Alright, everyone is here. Aizawa cut in, standing up as he was no longer leaning against the wall. It's time I give you all my final grade, he said with a neutral expression. He let out a sigh and an exhale. As far as plans go, for the time you had, you did what you could do. While I did mention to leave the damage to a minimum, most of the major damage done was incurred by the villains. Glass windows and roofs can easily be replaced, and water damage repaired. Aizawa's eyes went over to Todoroki and Tsuyu. The hostages were able to escape unharmed, but letting them leave with little cover was incredibly risky, even if the villains were blinded. The green-haired girl looked at her bandaged arms. Sorry, Ribbit, Tsuyu said. I thought about wrapping them all in my tongue, but I didn't want to risk getting them hurt since they would be banging around if I moved too fast. Aizawa nodded. But you kept your head cool, made the right judgment, and remembered how durable civilians are. He turned, red meeting red. Bakugo, you came up with the plan for Hagakure and Asui to infiltrate from the side and the roof. You also collaborated with Hagakure on using her quirk to double the blinding effect on the villains. You used a non-violent method to distract and stagger them, and from there they began to fall. Good work. Hagakure, the invisible girl, while she couldn't be seen with her gloves and shoes, seemed to have perked up. The same I said about Bakugo can be applied to you as well. You did put yourself in harm's way though, at the benefit of saving the hostages. Yeah, I knew Tsu was behind me and she had lightning fast reflexes, so I knew I could trust her to get me out of a pickle. Thanks for your faith, Ribbit. Tsuyu smiled. I know you can't see it, but high five. The frog girl raised a hand, letting her peer and friend smack it with her hand. They, Ribbit. Aizawa stared blankly, but his eye twitched a little. Dry eye, or something else. That level of trust can help you Hagakure, but be careful on who to place it in. It can backfire. Outside of that, excellent work not triggering the traps and keeping an open eye in the side building and the hallway in the bank. Hey, I should be a super secret agent. Like Ethan Hunt. The hell's he? Bakugo asked. Character from a spy movie franchise that went stale decades ago. Aizawa finished for him. Now, Asui. Tsuyu perked up. Her turn now. You had key moments in this where you were able to distract the villains and help the hostages by making a path. On top of that, you saved a comrade and acted quick on your feet. Nice work. Tsuyu blushed, smiling. If her parents were in the crowd, maybe they saw her. Or could they be in the other exams? Tsu didn't know, but her and her family were totally gonna celebrate with teriyaki fried crickets tonight. Thanks, Sensei. Ribbit. The shaggy-haired man turned his attention towards Todoroki. Todoroki, it was part of the plan to put up a barrier to keep the civilians away. And that was part of your role, but both you and Bakugo will be deducted points for that strategy. What the hell for? Bakugo's complaint was the loudest, but the others made their dismay known as well to go along with Todoroki's surprise. The dual-haired boy's eyes widening. Simple, as real as we try to make our simulations. No one in this exam will be seriously injured. However, that guarantee does not exist in the field. You blocked off the civilians from danger, but you also cut off any potential line of retreat for yourself or your teammates, cut off any emergency medical aid on first responders, cut yourselves off from potential hero reinforcements, or even the police. Logistically, their escape was impossible so long as Hagakure and Asui remained combat effective, with both being able to follow. Bakugo too. So half the benefit of preventing the villain's escape is rendered moot, and the other half of forming a perimeter could be established just as easily by having the police move their cars to blockade the streets. Too much risk for too little benefit. Fukuda shrugged. All you had to do was ask. The breakdown sucked the wind out of the students' collective sails and Bakugo looked like he was sick. It had been his plan. Given his comments, Tsuyu felt comfortable that she would pass, but man, what more could he want? On top of that, you didn't utilize your fire. Aizawa continued, looking at Todoroki. I won't fault you for that given the potential danger to the hostages and the requirement to avoid collateral damage as much as possible. However, simply freezing the ground won't be enough to stop villains of sufficient strength alone. You'll need to find innovative ways of using your ice going forward, as well as your fire power. Todoroki nodded. Other than that, you cooperated and contributed with the plan and took the initiative in being far enough away as to not threaten the villains, but close enough to make a move. He then turned towards Sato. Sato, you didn't do much, but... Sato blanched. You were able to hold down Rockmaster and protect your comrades when the villains attacked. You gave your team enough time to regroup once the negotiations had failed. However, you did not apply your quirk in any way other than the obvious, simply brute forcing your way through, and without both Todoroki and Bakugo to back you up, you likely would have been overwhelmed by the villain after a point. Your stamina isn't infinite, and though your quirk limits your intelligence for future events, I expect to see you working to curb the impact of such a disadvantage. Yes, Sensei, the boy said, swallowing thickly in his nervousness. Aizawa let him sweat a bit longer. You pass, though it is marginal. Work on it. Kaminari, the electric quirk user, audibly gulped. You fail. The bluntness of the statement seemed to knock the wind straight out of the boy. The task of being a negotiator isn't enviable, Aizawa said. It would incline me to be a bit more lenient on your scoring since it is, by definition, a support role meant to allow your other teammates to shine, and the area you engaged in is disadvantageous to your quirk, since hostages could get hurt and collateral damage would almost be unavoidable. However, he stared directly at him. It's called a negotiation, not a give the villains what they want talk. Once you'd promised them everything they wanted, all you did was speed up the clock for everyone else. The villains would have wanted those promises fulfilled quickly and would want more. Give them an inch, and you can bet they will take a mile and more. A negotiator needs to give them a half inch. All you did was placate them, and the longer it took, the more desperate they'd become, and the greater the risk to the hostages. And towards the end you could not even come up with a convincing enough lie to continue the farce, giving it away with your poor word choice and lack of forethought. Forcing your teammates to move before they were ready and risking the hostages. That's a performance that would have severe repercussions in the field, far greater than a single failed grade. Kaminari looked downright miserable at the dressing down with Hagakure and Sato patting him on the back to try and console the teen. But, how else could I have contributed to save the hostages? I mean, with my quirk I was useless and then trained to the point where your quirk won't be useless in a situation like this. Aizawa barked, cutting off Kaminari's excuse, and made Tsuyu flinch. Refine your quirk efficiency or get some kind of support gear so that you won't be a hindrance to the people you've sworn to protect and serve, your teammates, and yourself. Tell yourself this. Kaminari will book smart, save civilians. Food for thought. Kaminari sighed. I didn't want to. He felt the cutting eyes, and even Tsuyu bit her lip from Aizawa's glare, obviously not wanting to hear another excuse. Yes, sensei. Aizawa looked to Koda. Tsuyu turned with the rest of the students and noticed Koda biting his lower lip as he kept fiddling with his fingers. Aizawa took a deep breath as he scratched his head. Frankly, Koda, I'm on the fence with you. That wasn't what they'd expected. Your shyness, even with dealing in a situation like this with your classmates, made it difficult for them to work with you. When asked, you didn't explain your quirk or offer a demonstration. And while your intervention did give your teammates an opening to exploit, that was the coup de grace to the villains. Unknown quirks in a combat situation can just as easily be a disadvantage if not taken into account properly. This here is a controlled environment. I know your quirk, as do the others, but what if in the field, in the confusion and the chaos, someone mistakes your quirk that they don't know for an attack on the hostages, or believe there's a third villain hiding in the bank? Things can go wrong quickly. Koda seemed to shrivel in on himself, tears percolating in his eyes as he looked down and whimpered quietly. The benefit of your quirk helped today, but it could very easily have gone wrong. Your inability to overcome your own shyness is crippling even for a hero who wishes to specialize in disaster rescue, as you do. You have to go plus ultra, because one misstep, one error can lead to death or worse, and then it's on you. The older man shook his head before he let out a sigh. I'm sorry, but with all this taken into account, I don't believe I can. It's my fault. All eyes suddenly turned towards a very unexpected source. Bakugo's lip was curled, glaring at Aizawa with ruby red eyes. Even the shaggy-haired man was caught off guard. Oh? Fukuda asked, intrigued as he listened in. I came up with the plan. I gave everyone their roles. If I didn't bother to learn his quirk, that's on me, not him. If I didn't give him a role, that's on me, not him. He saw an opening and he took it, and it helped. We know how fast Cementos and Kaiju were. Without his birds, who's to say if something much worse wouldn't have happened? He straightened, grenade gauntlets clacking and clicking as he crossed his arms. You want to deduct points on anyone for not integrating his quirk into the plan? Deduct mine. I could fail you if I deduct too much. Aizawa shot back, but had a quirked eyebrow. Bakugo shrugged. Like I said, it was my fuck-up. The student and the teacher eyed one another for an eternity, Koda staring with unabashed awe at Bakugo. Frankly, so was everyone else. It was the absolute last thing anyone had expected out of the blonde bomber's mouth. Kaminari leaned towards the dumbfounded Sato. Dude, did Bakugo get laid or something during that internship? He whispered. The short fuse was lit. Shut the fuck up, you moron. Aizawa took a breath, turning towards Koda. I suppose, given the circumstances you passed then, Koda, I trust this is satisfactory. Koda paused, looking nervously towards Bakugo, who offered a careless shrug in response as he turned away. Take the points, you damn dinosaur. Needing no further prompting, Koda nodded so fast that Asui might have wondered that his head was gonna fall off as his tears of despair turned into tears of joy. Attaboy, Koda. Hagakure cheered as he embraced the bigger boy. Koda's face seemed to redden on the spot as he looked dazed and bewildered in jubilation. And by Hagakure hugging her naked form on his arm. Yeah, those birds saved our skins, Koda. You made us pass, Sato added with a pat on the back. And the dinosaur-looking boy didn't know how to react other than the pink on his cheeks. Kaminari sighed. Except me. Tsuyu smiled as Bakugo remained frowning while facing away, although Todoroki was offering a warm smile too. You did well, Koda-san. Take heart, he assured as the stocky boy nodded, wiping away the tears with his arm. All right then, head on back to the observation room, Aizawa said as he looked up at the camera on a building. Villain chase team, you're up, come on down to your designated area. That was fun, Fukuda added with his hands in his pockets. I'll be heading back to the station now. I take it Parker is in the next exam. I don't have to answer that, Aizawa muttered as his scarf covered his mouth. Fukuda smirked. I'll take it as a yes. Aizawa turned back towards him, giving a look before rolling his eyes and walking off. Fukuda smiled, and without a word, pocketed his hands in his jacket and walked in the opposite direction from the erasure hero. Tsuyu and the others followed Bakugo as Kaminari, Sato, and Hagakure were chatting up a storm. Koda was beside her and Todoroki as the blonde bomber walked on ahead. Koda looked relieved, even if he was fiddling with his fingers. Congratulations, Koda-chan, Tsuyu said as the boy gave her a look and a nod, and raised his head as he looked at Bakugo. Be Bakugo-san, said a voice that made everyone pause, and even the red-eyed bomber turned, glaring at the grateful and grinning Koda. Thank you for speaking up for me. No one's ever done that for me before, so. He gulped, then bowed down. Thank you very much. The blonde rolled his eyes and turned. Whatever, you did your job, he growled as he marched on forward. Koda rose back up. Did Koda just talk? You just spoke for the first time, man, Sato said in surprise. That's what you sound like, huh? Hagakure asked. I mean, does kinda fit the cute dinosaur vibe. Kaminari shrugged. Koda could only laugh bashfully and reply back in the same tone. And Tsuyu couldn't help but smile with him. Being here at UA was so much fun. It was something, certainly not Peter. Heck, he was still trying to wrap his head around it. Was it because he thought that his grade would be penalized if the entire team didn't pass? That would fit, trying to get most people on his team to pass. The asshole. He felt bad for Kaminari though, being put into such a bind and being flummoxed like that. He couldn't blame him. He might have done the same thing. Quite the test, isn't it? Momo commented. Oh, why yeah, Peter said, scratching the back of his neck. Makes me super excited about the next wave. Excited, dude, I'm stoked, Kirishima declared, slamming his hardened fists together so hard that sparks escaped between them. This is going to be the most manly thing that any of us have ever done. Some of us are girls here, Ashido pointed out. What's that got to do with it? Kirishima asked. Momo and Peter shared a look. Both of them shook their heads, neither of them were going to tell him. We should be moving, Shoji said from one of his many arms. He's right, Kirishima said. Come on everyone. Good luck, Momo said. Thanks, Peter said, giving a quick wave to everyone in the room. After everyone gave their cheers, the group went down to their designated area. A stairway that Bakugo and company weren't using, thankfully. Behind Peter, Kirishima rolled out his shoulders as Ashido stretched her arms. Uraraka took several breaths and did some stretches, with some swipes and a haya, to psyche herself up. Shiro and Shoji remained silent. Eventually, they got to the end, and emerged to find themselves looking at a huge cityscape. Memories of initiation flew through Peter's head. A better time, before all this started to get a little crazy for his tastes. Aizawa was already standing at the entrance, finishing applying eye drops. His tired eyes scanned over everyone, and when he saw everyone he checked his watch, pocketing his eye drops. Alright, so the situation is this, Aizawa started. The 6 of you are high-profile heroes. Top 10, top 20, whatever helps you visualize it. But the fact is that several of your most well-known villains have successfully robbed a bank and are currently running away with the money through the city. Your test is to keep up with the villains, while protecting the civilians that are in the street, and eventually, apprehend at least 2 of the 4 running from you. These villains know your powers well, and will be doing everything they can to stop you from taking them down. Any questions? Oh, yeah, Shiro said. Who are the teachers that we're going up against again? Aizawa's look was flatter than paper. Shiro's shoulders slumped. Any other questions? He asked. When can we get started? Kirishima asked, grinning. A question that made Aizawa of all people smile in a way that made Peter's spidey sense go off. As soon as everyone is all set up, he said. His hand rose and he clicked something in his ear. Are you ready to go? Aizawa asked. There was a sudden explosion in one of the buildings behind him, catching the students by surprise. From the dust cloud, a massive robot on wheels emerged. The money is mine. Mine. Mwahaha. Nezu's voice came from the spider-like tank as it swerved and took off down the street. The students got into position, hyped up and ready to be unleashed like a drawn arrow. Alright then students, Shouta smirked. Capture the villains and arrest them, and leave no one behind. Save any bystanders along the way. Fulfill these requirements and you pass. Your final exam begins. Now, the spider race car thing revved its engines, and in the distance the manic cry of one mousy principal practically laughed up a storm as he left skid marks the size of Peter on the concrete. Peter and Shiro reacted faster than the others, bringing up web shooters and elbows respectively. Wait, Peter turned, just in time to see Uraraka touch both herself, Shoji, and Kirishima on the shoulder. You're a genius, Peter called, throwing out a line of webbing. Hitch a ride. He felt Kirishima get on his back, followed by Uraraka. They were as light as a feather. Sorry if I choke you with my arms, the brunette said as she hung onto the redhead, pressing her chest against his back. Ooh, don't worry about it. Kirishima balked, sounding flustered himself. Alright, up and away ace. I can't fly dude. Not with that unmanly attitude. We'll catch up. Shoji yelled, launching off in a mighty leap to the top of a building as Shiro threw out his tape and took off. Ashido simply legged it by using her acid to skate along the street. And when Peter pulled on his webline, he launched forward feeling like he was only carrying himself. In the corner of his vision, he saw Kirishima smiling like a madman at the sensation of swinging. Letting his instincts guide him, Peter swung forwards, taking to the skies above the city streets. Below him, the race car with long legs and wheels and the maniacal laughter of the mousy principal continued to echo out. He was driving like a madman, running into the sides of buildings, barreling through glass and concrete like they were nothing. Peter cut a line and twisted to avoid a shard of glass, making both his passengers scream for completely different reasons. Just behind him, Zero threw out another line, utilizing his quirk's natural retraction of its tape to almost keep pace with Peter. I've heard about mad mice, but this is ridiculous, Peter screamed. Sucks to be him though, Zero says, switching from one line to the next. With all these buildings, he'll have to start jumping on roofs to get away from us. From the window of the great car, Principal Nezu smiled. Wait, was he holding a cup of coffee? On the buildings. What a wonderful idea you heroes have given me. I'm WHAHAHA. Then Peter heard a gear shift, and then all four wheels of the crazy spider car burst out, revealing two long spider-like legs. Spikes and claws came out of the tires, and with a mighty leap, the car latched onto the side of a building. Oh come on, how is that even fair? Zero screamed. One claw dug in deeper than the others, ripping out a piece of concrete the size of Peter. It threw it straight at him. Oh geez, Peter screamed. Oh rock, Uraraka screamed. Instinct forced Peter to throw out a line towards the nearest building. He pulled back, bringing him feet crashing against the wall, and the rock missing. Before anyone could so much as breathe, Peter quickly whipped out another line of webbing. But this one he latched to the rock. Momentum nearly made him fly in the opposite direction, but his natural adhesion and brute strength kept him planted on the building. The webbing went taut, almost to the point of snapping before losing what kinetic energy it had left. Potential took over there as Peter pulled on the line just enough to turn the rock from a projectile into a hammer. It fell in a downward arc, and Peter pulled as hard as he could, giving it all the power he was able to muster before losing it at the spider tank. The attack crashed right against the side of the metal monstrosity, making it lose its grip on the building. It fell maybe 10 feet, catching itself with those weird legs and scurrying along like there was no problem at all. He could even hear Nezu yell out in surprise. Peter rolled his eyes and pulled himself to the closest building. Sticking his legs to the side, he ran as fast as he could, keeping the weird thing in sight. Geez, it's not even slowing down after that hit. What is that thing made out of? Zero asked. Your tuition, Nezu called back, laughing maniacally. The spider vehicle turned another corner, Peter and Zero right on its tail, and Peter's eyes bulged out of their sockets at the sight in front of him. This new street, unlike all the others, was filled with people. Ectoplasm clones lined the sidewalks, and a few of them sat in cars as they faked going through their day-to-day lives. Oh look at that, distractions, Nezu declared. Without a second thought, the spider drone picked up one of the cars and threw it behind him. We got the cars, Peter screamed, throwing out a web line to the ground and letting both of his passengers jump off. Peter stood fast, sticking himself to the concrete just under a car. Several thousand pounds crashed into him, his fingers bending the metal of the hood when he caught them. As soon as he got a grip on the vehicle, Peter spun, letting the momentum send the car driving down the street instead of going to a complete stop against him. Another came towards them, and Kirishima jumped into action. His entire body hardened in a flash of sound like sheathing steel. Again, the car crumpled, but Kirishima stood strong. Inside the car, the Ecto clone hit an airbag and shook its head, but it was undamaged. Uraraka was on the ground. Get out of the street, everyone, she called out, waving her arm as the Ecto clones seemed to follow her cue and fled towards the buildings. The sound of alarms caught his attention, and two more cars took to the sky. Peter sprinted forwards, throwing out a dozen shots of webbing between two buildings. His wrists shot out like a machine gun, and two cars landed safely on a web that slowed their descent just enough to make them land safely. In the cars, several Ectoplasm clones nodded their thanks. Steer clear. This is a hero situation, Zero screamed. And in the corner of his eye, Peter caught the taped classmate rushing through over the sidewalks, pulling civilians out of the way when the car's path of destruction got a bit too close. But it wasn't enough. Principal Nezu went straight for the jugular, grasping hold of one of the clones with his massive car claw thing. Ace, Kirishima screamed, running towards him, give me a boost. The redhead reached out his hand, and Peter summoned what little sports skill he had to throw him like a baseball. Weightless and harder than diamond, Kirishima spun like a top straight towards the bot. Release, Uraraka shouted, bringing her hands together and giving every pound of weight back to the hardened quirk user. Red Riot Driheel, he roared, his voice distorting as he flew away. The red riot smashed into the joint of the spider limb, and hardened strength ripped through metal like it was made of wet cardboard. Peter had just enough sense to throw out a web to cushion the civilian's fall before his brain caught up with him. Kirishima slammed a hand into the ground, carving a gouge of concrete out of the street in order to slow his attack. He smiled at the now surrounded villain and smashed his hands together. All right, you lump of lead, not very manly of you to attack civilians. Dude, that was awesome. Peter called, waving. I know right. Kirishima grinned, only for his attention to snap back to the spider tank. Around the spider car, the Ecto clones did the sensible thing and moved out of the way, or kept their cars at a distance where they couldn't be attacked by the villain. Poking his head out of the window, Nezu threw his head back and gasped. Oh no, is this the end of my villainous rampage? Oh, whatever will I do with my well-earned vacation money to Hawaii? He smiled again, ear to ear as the mouse bear showed off very bear-like fangs, and Peter felt that chill go down his spine once more. Of course not, for I have this thing called a backup plan. Backup plan? What are you? A rattling in his bones made Peter cut himself off. He jumped to the side as fast as he could, twisting in the air. A crack, a spark, and one of his web shooters exploded. He pulled it off his wrist, throwing it before the leaking fluid could cover him. It landed on the floor, covering part of the street in the white substance. The spider car revved its engines, its 3 legs making it pull ahead as it began to limp gallop away. Hey, get back here, Zero screamed, throwing out a line of tape and taking after him. Zero, wait. Peter called, arm reached out. Another tingle, but this time Peter didn't have to move. He just watched as Zero's tape was cut off, his momentum sending him headfirst into the side of a building. Kirishima jumped after him, his strength giving him just enough edge to land on the side and catch his friend before the other boy could hit. You okay there? Kirishima asked. Yeah, what's going on? Zero asked, and why is Parker's web all over the street? Kirishima blinked once, right before his head jerked forward. Something slammed into the back of his skull, sending both him and Zero into the street. Peter launched himself forwards, sliding on the ground and just barely managing to turn himself into a cushion to stop their landing. Oh, Kirishima said, wah. What hit me? He tried to get up, but as if the ground was covered in ice, his hands slipped, making him fall face first into the ground. Oh geez, I don't feel so hot. He began to slur. Peter didn't answer. He just threw the 3 of them behind a building as fast as he could. Behind him, he saw that Mizo and Uraraka had the same idea, swinging into an open window of a local building. He saw Ashido slide in using her acid, using some parked cars as cover. What happened? Ashido exclaimed as Peter looked at the red-haired boy, his eyes rolling everywhere. I dunno. Woa. So many Ashidus, Kirishima said. Well, if I had to guess, I'd say we're getting our asses kicked. Or getting shot. One or the other. Maybe both. No, both sound good. From the monitoring room, Aizawa watched everything go down from a dozen monitors, every one of them giving him a different view of the situation along with ears to listen in. So far, the students had done reasonably well. They wasted no time sending the faster members of the team forward in order to make sure that the villain couldn't escape, while providing ways for the other, slower members to keep up. Ashido and Shoji being the 2 to stay behind was a good call. So long as Shoji directed her, Ashido could be far behind and still rejoin the group, as well as help to usher civilians away as she made her way towards the rest of them. Even in the spirit of the exercise, she feigned a phone call with her hand. While all students weren't allowed to bring their phones, if out in the hero field, calling for backup was integral and crucial. She may be a social ditzy butterfly, but she paid attention to the prior exam. Only Shoji held the rear and used his quirk to keep track of Nezu's movements or of anyone else. But even from his position, his senses would be useful. Now, however, they could see the change in the test. Assume that someone's a hero. If these were well-known villains, that meant they had experience fighting said hero, and that implied they know exactly how to put them into a position where they held all the cards. Above him, a monitor drone showed Snipe as he loaded another round into his sniper rifle, or as Nezu described him during the briefing, the single biggest counter this entire school had against those like Parker and Zero. The 2 of them had some of the highest mobility quirks in their grade, demonstrated very clearly during their time in the sports festival. Only Bakugo, Ada, or Yaoyorozu, and as of late, Midoriya, would be able to keep up. But what happened when all of that mobility only put someone into a villain's line of sight? Such a development called for altered tactics, and from what he could see, the group gathered together in a recreation of a cafe, huddling together and taking account of Kirishima's injury and their predicament. Now, with the situation changed and a hero hit, the next part of the test would begin. Let's see what you can do. Aizawa murmured. What is with bad guys and using guns? Like, sure, everyone here had superpowers, providing enough of a reason to pack a little heat from time to time. But still, right now, Peter was doing his best to sit still while Zero finished up tapping off the street from the safety of the cafe. Several lines of tape stretched from the inside of the cafe to the building across the street. Uraraka took a few deep breaths, doing her best to stop the negative side effects of her quirk as she recovered, while Shoji took point next to the one of the exits, using his tentacle ears and eyes to keep watch. Ashido gently put a dampened cloth on the back of Kirishima's head. The redhead boxer laid on his side, groggily rubbing his eyes. "How is he?" Peter asked. The pink girl gave him a smile. "He's fine. It's not the first hit he's taken in his life, but this one hurts a lot more," Kirishima uttered, his words coming out distorted, like his body thought that he was in a tunnel. "It's making everything all shaky." He tried to reach behind his head to the spot in question, but the motion was lethargic and lazy. Ashido sighed and slapped his hand away. "Don't move. I don't know what hit you." "A specialty bullet from Snipe most likely," Shoji said, one of his eyes twitching in the wind just outside the exit. "There's someone stationed near the top of the central skyscraper. I can't make out too many details, but there's a window open in every direction on that floor, and they've got something sticking out of the edge." "What is it?" Kirishima asked, his voice quieter. "A gun," Ashido said. "What else would Professor Snipe have?" Even with whatever was going on with Kirishima, he had enough strength to go as red as his hair. Cause she had a point. Snipe was a gunslinger, a good one from what Peter had heard. Apparently, he could hit pretty much anything so long as he had line of sight. Shoji's tentacle ears twitched. "And from what I can tell, Principal Nezu has left his car," Shoji continued. "I think he's climbing up to something, but what it is I can't tell." "Wait, if he left the car, doesn't that mean that he left the money?" Zero asked, his tone indicating a quirked eye. "Yeah, but that's not what we've got to worry about right now," Shoji replied, his masked face turning towards the helmeted tape user. "What are you talking about?" "We were chasing a villain to get the money," Zero said. "He left the money, so we're good." "Weren't we also supposed to capture the villains?" Uraraka pointed out, emphasizing the S, you know, plural. "Remember what Aizawa said?" the taller, muscular, multi-armed boy said. "The 6 of us are famous heroes, and villains robbed a bank and went hog wild in the city. They know our powers well thanks to our celebrity status, and will be doing everything they can to escape and take us down." "Man, you have a good memory," Ashido mused. "Don't forget," Peter said as he turned towards Shoji. "Aizawa said that 2 was running from us, so Nezu probably had help in the tank. You think it's a surprise like that Amajiki guy from the first exam or Ectoplasm?" Ashido scoffed. "Great. More unknowns. At least we know to expect something extra." Peter shrugged, to which Shoji nodded. "In general, we were supposed to capture and arrest at least 2 of them, leave no one behind, and save any bystanders along the way," the multi-armed boy added. "And now we're down 1 guy, with the super genius in one corner and a sniper in the other," Peter finished. "Ham hot hound," Kirishima said, pushing himself off the ground, only for his legs to buckle under him, leaving him no choice but to fall into Ashido. "Take it easy. You did your best." "TCH, lucky bastard," Zero muttered, only to get slapped upside the head by Uraraka. "Doh." "Moving on, we're stuck between a mouse and a sniper rifle," Peter said, stepping forward, "which is easily the weirdest situation I've been in, and that's saying something." He walked over to the cafe, taking out a pen and a notepad from behind the counter. Quickly as he could, he drew a crude map of the area before handing it to Shoji. "Can you give an estimate on where Nezu is?" The 4-armed boy nodded, quickly taking the notepad and pen. In seconds, a far more detailed map of the surrounding area was on display on the small piece of paper. "Nice drawing," Peter said. "It comes with the territory," Shoji said. He reached down, one of his hands pointing at a structure about a block away. "This is where Nezu is climbing up." His finger moved to the center of the map, and Snipe is located near the top floor of this one. "How high up?" Zero asked. 15 stories, Shoji answered, give or take. Slowly, those that could move came together in a little circle around the small piece of paper. "So," Peter started, "what are we looking at?" Zero scratched his head, and Uraraka frowned. "Well, Principal Nezu is supposed to be like, really smart," Uraraka said. "He's like, the smartest creature in the world or something. And Snipe has a perfect position considering his power set," Shoji said. "The fact that he's not using his quirk, homing, to utterly dominate and send homing tranquilizers into all of us is telling. He's holding back for the purpose of this exam, while still acting like a god-tier sniper dude," Zero finished. "And we're down the 1 guy that's most likely to ignore someone shooting at them," Peter pointed out, looking down at his friend. In Ashido's lap, Kirishima was still, the only movement being the gentle rise and fall of his chest. "He's out," the pinkette said. "Aw crap," Zero said with a grimace. "Now what are we going to do to get him out of here?" "Not get shot," Uraraka offered. Zero shot her a deadpan stare. "Ya think?" A massive hand stretched between the 2 instantly. Arguing won't help us, Shoji stressed. But how are we supposed to get around Snipe? Ashido asked. He could just shoot us the second that we leave cover. Are we just supposed to jump between buildings and hope that we can get to Snipe in time? Shoji shook his head. No, Nezu is a genius. The more time we give him to set anything up, the bigger our problems will be. Yeah, with him being so smart, he could probably outthink everything that the group could come up with. A scary thought, considering what a normal guy thinking critically was capable of when given enough time. A shock spiked through Peter's spine, and his head snapped to the exit. Shoji's ears twitched, and his normal eyes widened. A second later, the ground shook and all of the students tensed as a cloud of dust came down the street. What the hell just happened? A building just went down, Nezu said, answering Peter's unsaid question. 4 sets of jaws dropped to the floor. What? Ashido gasped. A building, Zero screamed. The multi-armed boy's tentacle twitched as the ears flexed. And with it a decent chunk of cover, Shoji said. Judging by the distance and the rail beams coming down. Has to be the construction site, so no civilians there. Peter had to shake his head, racking his brain as he looked at the situation. They're not running away, he said quietly, looking at the others. This was never a robbery, or an escape, villain chase. These are villains actively drawing us into a trap. He saw Uraraka blanch, the sudden realization hitting them all. Shoji shook his head. Doesn't matter. It doesn't change the situation. Their capture is still the goal. Civilian safekeeping is still our priority. All they've done is move up the timetable. So let's focus. Peter nodded. Do you guys think you can get to Nezu if Snipe isn't pinning you down? Ashido and Shoji's eyes widened slightly at the implication. Will you be able to keep Snipe distracted by yourself? The multi-armed boy asked. I'm equipping Loudmouth in bright red and blue spandex, Peter said. If Peter was being critical, his answer didn't really answer the question, but the masked boy seemed to accept it as one with a nod. Uraraka didn't really look convinced, nor did Ashido, but Zero gave him a cocky grin and a thumbs up, which was probably the best endorsement that Peter was going to get. We'll go out as soon as you start distracting Snipe-sensei, Uraraka said as she took a deep breath to calm her nerves or get ready. Peter didn't know. He himself then patted his cheeks, getting his game face on. Yeah, stay behind the buildings, and if you're desperate, maybe take to the sewers or something. Ashido blanched. Even Zero grimaced. Dude, our suits will smell for a week. Peter shrugged, and Peter took the chance to run out the opposite end of the cafe waving his arms about. Hey McCree, what time is it? He yelled in English. His answer came in the form of a tingle down his spine. And that was all the warning he got before he had to jump to the side, landing feet first on the side of a building. He felt the spider sense flare again as he started sprinting up, where a moment before the spot he was in took a bullet to the wall. Peter flipped up onto the roof and landed as his HUD flared to life. A line drew itself across the buildings, giving him a route towards the monolith before him. So all he had to do was run along rooftops for 5 blocks, dodge sniper fire, and hopefully keep Snipe distracted long enough for everyone to make a move. His head jerked to the side, and he heard something whiz past his ear. He jumped up, avoiding another shot that smashed against the ground under him. The boy in blue and red passed through some Ecto clones and parents as Todoroki Fuyumi gawked at the boy's speed. He was fast. Stay clear, he yelled, landing on a lamppost, firing another web shot and slinging off as the lamp was soon destroyed by another bullet. Sure is a quick one, isn't he? The violet-haired woman beside her said. Jiru-san, if Fuyumi remembered when they made small talk as they got into position. Sure is, Fuyumi mused. Do your best, kids, Jiru yelled, waving. Fuyumi turned, and then smiled as she cupped her hands and yelled too. You can do it. The angle was perfect. The speed was exactly where it needed to be, and the structural integrity of the building collapsed exactly how Nezu predicted it would. A few hundred tons of steel, glass, and concrete fell in on one another, toppling to the side to begin what could only be described as the world's most expensive set of dominoes. And down they go, Nezu called, throwing his paws into the air. I think you're enjoying this a bit too much, sir, Ectoplasm said through their comms. Oh hush you, Nezu waved off. I think with all the paperwork that I've had to do in the last few weeks, I deserve a little free time. Be that as it may, it's disturbing, Ectoplasm admitted. Then I'm playing the part of a villain perfectly. If you say so, boss man, Snipe said, throwing his 2 cents in. There was the vague sound of exertion on his line, most likely due to the recoil of his rifle. Are all of them trying to get close to you, Snipe? Nezu asked. Nope, Snipe said, pausing to take another shot. Just Parker, everyone else left their little hidey hole a while ago. My guess is they're heading your way. Given the timing, they wouldn't have been able to clear more than a few blocks. Nezu let his mind run wild with the calculations. Well, it wouldn't be good if I didn't make their journey a little more interesting. He pulled another lever, and the ball swung again. Once again, everything went according to plan. Now, to wait 3 minutes and 47.1 seconds. Geez, the principal just demoed an entire building. Kaminari yelled as he and the rest of his class stood in the observation room seeing the second exam unfurl before them. I wonder who rebuilds it. I mean, the battle center is used by the other students too, right? Hagakure asked. Yeah, contractors or robots. Kaminari put a hand to his chin. Hey recovery girl, he said, looking at the nurse as she sat at her station, looking at the monitors. Got an answer for this. Contractors, the little old woman replied, and sometimes the support course. Power Loader says that teaching a little engineering and architecture is good for them. Izuku would have been looking around, but he was so engrossed in this exam. Peter was dodging the bullets with his quirk, running just as fast as he had in the sports festival. Maybe even faster. Take note of his footwork. Learn to anticipate your enemy's every move. Izuku muttered to himself as Peter used his hand to springboard himself off a satellite dish. Why is Parker leaving everyone behind though? I mean, we know Ectoplasm, the real one, is there as a villain. And whoever is the surprise villain is too. Jiru spoke out. I see it differently. Takoyami spoke out, and Izuku turned as the bird-headed boy had his usual hard glare up at the screen. They huddled together prior to this for a plan. Clearly, it's part of a strategy, if I had to guess, a distraction for the others. Yeah, but like, wouldn't it be better to attack en masse? Not like Snipe can take them all out if they go in at different angles. Kaminari said as he pointed at the screen. Not while they're trying to get Kirishima out, Yaoruzu said. On screen, the group handed off the downed hero to a group of ecto-clones that were dressed up as paramedics. The second the door closed they headed out, presumably towards Nezu. Come on guys. Hey look, Sato yelled. Peter grabbed hold of a, well, there he goes for the sewer grate. Wait, is that machine gun fire? Hagakure squealed as Izuku's eyes widened. Snipe had tossed the sniper rifle for a machine gun. Or rather, an assault rifle spewing paintballs. Yaoruzu finished for her. She would know. On screen, the American pulled up the sewer grate, using it as a shield to guard against the fire while he ran for another set of cover. What is he going to do? Jiru asked as Snipe peppered it with a barrage of paintball fire. Normally paintballs weren't too threatening, but considering how Peter had that kind of spatial awareness or something, and that Snipe had a non-lethal bullet capable of incapacitating Kirishima, Peter wasn't taking any chances. Peter's head was on a swivel until the firing stopped. Peter aimed his hand at a manhole lid and fired a quick stream of webbing. He jumped and twirled the lid like a discus with his web, much like how he did with the debris earlier. Peter flung it, causing Snipe to duck and dodge the projectile rather than fire his reloaded assault rifle. After the metal disc punched through the windowsill where he was, Snipe shifted back into position. But Peter was barely a few blocks away now. Hey look, Todoroki, is that your dad? The dual quirk user went as still as a statue. Endeavor sat on a street bench, flames whipping around his shoulders, barely a block away from where the teachers were having their mock battle with the students. But the number 2 hero couldn't really be bothered to participate in this waste of his time. His arms crossed as he stood in silence. When his daughter told him that they'd be participating in the exams for Shoto, he fully expected to be in SHOTO's exam, not relegated to a civilian role in someone else's little foray. He needed to see what his son could do, how he behaved under pressure and climbed to the top over his peers. Instead he was here, waiting for, excuse me, sir. His burning eyes swiveled to a round-faced, brown-haired girl in a skin-tight black and pink costume nervously standing next to him. It's not safe here in Dia Air, Mr. Civilian. You really need to leave. Consider your points acquired. He scoffed. Go about your exam, girl. She straightened, puffing herself up where she stood. I can't leave you in the line of fire, sir. It's unsafe. I'm not going anywhere, he growled, turning away. The girl hesitated next to him and Endeavor was sure she would turn and leave now. Then she smacked him. All 5 little fingers clapped him right across the cheek, leaving him so stunned for a moment that he didn't even notice when he began floating off the bench. He did, however, notice when the girl grabbed him by the boot and began running him across the street, away from the fighting, flopping him around like an overgrown helium balloon. GWAH. Unhand me. I quote am sorry. I quote am sorry. It's for your safety, sir. Child, you will release me this instant. You're a civilian. I quote am saving you. So help me, I will blacklist you from joining any hero agency in the country if you do not let go immediately. I quote am sorryyyyyy. Quietly, the entire class in the observation room turned, looking towards Todoroki. To their surprise, the dual-haired boy was struggling to choke down his laughter. His face was puckered, sucking in his lips as he did his best not to guffaw on the spot. If he ever had kids, he would tell them about this day, with the biggest goddamn smile on his face. Minutes later, after releasing Endeavor in the cover of a safe building, Ochako moved to use her quirk on 2 dumpsters in order to make them light and easy to pull across the alleyway's opening. And more importantly, they would provide cover. As she touched the second wrought iron dumpster, Ochako felt her stomach flip-flop. Great. Shoji took hold of the 2 dumpsters in 2 of his arms, the others peeking out to the end of the alley. An ear twitched, and an eye spun around. "We're clear," Shoji said, 2 blocks ahead. Zero nodded, taking point with Ishido right behind him. Shoji followed her, and Ochako took up the role of rear guard. Not the best formation they could come up with, but they needed to keep moving, so the 2 fastest members set the pace with Shoji guiding them. Every step made Ochako's stomach churn. Somehow she kept it in, an achievement that was hardly impressive considering what everyone else was putting in. Maybe she should have made another thing weightless so Parker could have more protection. Or something even remotely more useful than giving Shoji 2 weightless beatsticks. But it was something, which was always better than nothing. "Think we managed to sneak up on them?" Ishido asked. One of Shoji's eyes blinked, then widened to their limits. "Move," he screamed. No one stopped to question his words. Instinct and fear pushed them forward faster than any explanation. And a good thing they did so, because the sound of bending metal and crumbling concrete filled the air. It started slow, a single twitch in the air, then everything started falling down behind them. Ishido and Zero jumped forward, letting their quirks launch them into the air or slide on the ground. Ochako quickly made herself weightless and latched herself onto Shoji. The multi-armed boy sprinted as fast as he could, almost as fast as Ishido could skate. The 4 of them emerged from the alleyway, and nearly froze right then and there. Because all around them, the buildings fell one atop the other. A ring of buildings, all coming down till they were surrounded by a ring of broken wreckage, and in the center of it all, 2 massive obstacles looked down at them. One was Nezu, sticking his mousy head out of a crane with a wrecking ball, waving at them with a grin on his face. The other was a giant ectoplasm clone the same size as that wrecking ball crane. It lumbered out from behind the steel structure, looking down at everyone there. "Ah, there you are," it said. It raised a massive peg leg that put everyone in its shadow. Ochako felt a hand grab her shoulder, and suddenly she was thrown clear before Shoji jumped away from the descending appendage. She landed among the wreckage, shaking her head enough to see Ishido and Zero take off in opposite directions. Ishido used what little flat earth remained to skate away, and Zero went full madman and latched onto the Ecto clone's other leg to launch himself. The giant clone looked almost confused that the student would attach himself to him, slowly turning his head to watch the student land a few meters away. Now, the 4 of them were in completely different parts of the clearing, and the clone took some time to wonder which it should go after. All the while, Principal Nezu laughed maniacally. Shoji took the second of hesitation to smash the twin weightless dumpsters into the clone's body. They tore into the ankle, but the pale substance that made up the clone simply grabbed hold of the dumpsters like it was entirely made of that web stuff that Parker used. Ochako promptly released the dumpsters from her quirk. Shoji abandoned both of his weapons, eyes narrowing in contemplation. "Oh come on," Zero screamed. "What the hell are you made of?" "Doom." Ectoplasm roared. A single sweep of the giant's peg leg smashed into the ground, scattering chunks of debris as big as the students. Shoji had to bring all of his arms together to block one that got too close, and Ishido barely managed to get out of the blast range with her acid. From the smoke cloud, Zero jumped forward, latching onto the crane with his tape. He reeled himself forward, grabbing hold of the service ladder. Another line of tape latched onto the roof of Nezu's control booth. With a grin, Zero started to reel himself in. Nezu responded by reaching for a pair of scissors, looking almost comical in his hands. With barely a breath, he cut the tape line and kicked away the ladder. Momentum carried Zero up, only for him to get a paw in his face as Nezu punched him just hard enough to send him tumbling down. Another string let him stick to the side of the crane, leaving him safe for now. "I got punched in the face by a friggin' rat," Zero cursed. "That's a bear mouse to you," Nezu retorted as the crane turned and Zero yelped as he fired out tape and swung away, the wrecking ball crashing where he once was. Everyone else was running around, trying not to get stomped or trapped by the giant clone. Ochako looked around. What could she use? What could she do? There was nothing but rocks and she couldn't get close enough to anyone to make use of them. But someone else could. Ochako immediately touched the biggest, closest thing that she could. A chunk of cement bigger than she was tall was dragged out of the pile. Ochako felt her stomach tie itself in knots, but she ignored it as best as she could. She stepped out of her cover and screamed, "Zero," and threw the boulder as hard as she could. It sailed into the air, making the great giant glance up with more surprise than actual concern. Zero jumped out of cover, his line of tape latching onto the top of the underside of Nezu's compartment. The other line latched onto the weightless boulder. He pulled just as Ochako put her fingers together. "Release," she screamed. The giant's eyes widened, right before a fully weighted boulder crashed into its head, aimed by Zero's tape. But instead of smashing into it, making it stagger or do anything, it just took the rock without even flinching. It faded into the great mass that made up the clone, and when said clone was finished, that same sickly smile turned on her. "There you are." Ochako didn't hesitate. She grabbed hold of rocks as fast as she could. She felt like a kid, flinging stones at a lake. But only this time, every time that she got any of the rocks out, she let go. But every single one of them was as useless as the first. The giant just took a few extra quaking steps forward before glaring down at the hero. "Were you trying to plan something, hero?" he asked, raising his foot. Ochako beamed up at him. She felt ill, but still managed to remain standing. "Not really, but they did." That answer stopped Ectoplasm for an instant, and suddenly the sound of grinding metal rang out. The giant clone turned, eyes widening to the size of satellite dishes as it saw Ashido against the edge of the crane. Her acid covered one leg as much as it could, then a line of tape wrapped around it, as well as 4 arms. As one, Shoji and Zero pulled, and a second of the 4 crane legs was ripped free of its housing. From the top of the control booth, Nezu blinked. "Oh dear," he said, "that doesn't sound good." "It's not supposed to," Shoji screamed, exertion making him raise his voice as he dashed for the 3rd leg. The giant Ectoplasm took a step forward, but Ochako had plenty of time to use his distraction. Charging straight at the clone's leg. Some might have called it crazy, and they'd probably be right. She ran as fast as she could, her heart thundering in her chest. The giant took 1 step forward, but the other leg was still there. One more push got Ochako there, and when she pressed her hand against the leg, she felt her world spin. She dropped to the ground, spilling everything she'd eaten within the last day on the floor as she soiled her skin-tight costume, bile burning her throat. But she didn't release, not yet. She couldn't see him, but she could hear the surprised gasp coming from the giant. When she didn't hear another foot hit the ground, then did she release. Suddenly, the sound that covered her was deafening. She couldn't really see, the dust and the spinning turning the world into a blurry mess. She couldn't really hear anything, the ringing in her ears beyond anything she'd ever heard before. This probably would be a good time to leave, to get out of the way before everything got out of hand. Oh wait, she couldn't get her legs under her. Everything just kept spinning. Something wrapped around her waist, and Ochako couldn't do a thing to stop it. She blinked away the nausea as best as she could, and she saw something that looked like a wing surrounding her. Shoji. Quite the impressive distraction, I must say. Principal Nezu. She shook off the nausea again, and found herself being carried right alongside Principal Nezu while Shoji ran for the line of downed buildings. Zero and Ashido were close by, and behind them, the giant form of Ectoplasm started getting up. "Ectoplasm is still back there," Mina shouted. "You wanna fight a giant?" Zero asked. "Besides," Shoji started, pulling himself over a downed wall, "we have no way of holding the giant down. Nezu is the only villain that we can apprehend. Right now, I doubt the real Ectoplasm will be so kind as to stay in one place for us to capture." The mouse next to her chuckled, making Ochako frown. "What are you laughing about?" "Absolutely nothing," the mouse declared. "Oh come on," Zero screamed, vaulting over a rock, "can't you say something? I invoke my right to remain silent." So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 16. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video, till then goodbye.